There was one memory that our heroine could not forget. She was 20 years old then. It was summer vacation time. The girl received an offer from her uncle who lived in Hong Kong. It was her first trip to the central area of the city. Uncle had planned the time well, and the trip was going to be perfect. Yunha was looking forward to a sea of emotions. That was the day when our heroine boarded a tourist bus in a hurry. And upon arrival, she found herself in a completely unfamiliar place. The girl, having bought some local souvenirs, began to look around with curiosity. She just stared for a while, and as a result, she was left alone. Her legs somehow carried her to an unfamiliar place. Yunha sighed heavily. She didn't know where she was, and what kind of place it was. She started asking people, but no one understood her. The girl began to call for help. Fear stood in her eyes. Our heroine didn't understand Chinese, and passers-by didn't understand that she was asking where Monkey House was. There were repeated attempts to ask for directions or help, but all was in vain. Tears came to the girl's eyes. She sat down on a bench. Yunha opened the phone. She thought that it was useless to her now. The screensaver was a photo of her and her family. She was beginning to regret not staying home. If only she had known how things would turn out. Our heroine suddenly remembered how painful it was to see the cold bodies of her loved ones, who had left this world so suddenly and simultaneously. The girl closed the phone. A characteristic clicking sound was heard. She thought about it, and then called herself a fool. Someone asked back Yunha why she was sad. She was so surprised that she made a sudden movement and knocked over one of the shopping bags. She screamed. The young man hurried to help lift it up since it was his fault. He informed that the buses were no longer running at that time, and this remote area was dangerous. Moreover, there was almost no public transport here even during the day. He advised to call friends. At the same time, while talking, he helped the girl pack all her bags. He smiled sweetly, showing sympathy. Yunha was surprised to hear her native language. She grabbed the young man's hands. He was a little taken aback. Our heroine began to ask and beg him with tears in her eyes to help her. The girl asked him to take her home. As it turned out, her savior's name was Sun Ho. And thanks to him, our heroine finally managed to contact her uncle. Yunha's greatest fear was getting lost in an unfamiliar country without knowing the language. The girl had already imagined that she would be sold for organs. But now she was happy and sincerely thanked her savior. Sun Ho said that tourists were not often seen in this area, so he was surprised to see a female student standing alone in the middle of the street. Our heroine answered laughingly that it just happened that way, and that she was so happy to meet him. She called her new acquaintance her hero. The young man replied that it was not difficult for him at all. Yunha was curious about the package he had. She assumed that it was a gift, for a girl. A new acquaintance was preparing a gift for his son, whom he had not seen for a long time. He assured him that he had chosen something that he would like. But he had doubts. The girl opened one of the packages. There were some goodies in there that anyone could like. She offered to give them as a gift. She asked him to accept them as a token of her gratitude. Sun Ho thanked him shyly. He was sure that his son San Ho would definitely like such a present. Yunha smiled widely at him in response. She assured him that she would be happy if that happened. The young man asked if the student had given him all the candies only because she herself did not like them. She denied it. At some point, there was silence between them. Yunha was the first to break it. She asked what he wanted to say. Sun Ho became embarrassed and blushed. He said that the girl looked familiar to him, and asked if they could have met before. Our heroine wondered if her new acquaintance had crossed the line. She replied that she was seeing him for the first time. The girl reminded him that he was a family man, and she thought his tricks were old-fashioned. Then a car drove up and honked its horn. It was time to say goodbye. They had come for Sun Ho. He should have been leaving already. He thanked her again for the gift. Yunha wondered if he was trying to tell her something. She felt awkward. The new acquaintance turned around. He hesitated. He wasn't quite sure. He asked to forget. He assumed that he had made a mistake. The boy was already waiting for him. Our heroine was at a loss. Then her gaze focused on the child. The baby was also looking at her, big blue sad eyes on half of his face. His look was sad and painfully familiar. The girl assumed that it was the son of her new acquaintance, and she definitely met his gaze. Yunha started searching for her phone in the bag. She forgot to ask Seon Ho what time it was. But soon the girl became convinced that there was nothing she was looking for at the bottom under the purchases. She began to look around. She saw the device lying on the road. The phone was open. Our heroine silently hoped that its screen was not broken. She reached out to take it. Suddenly, there was a noise of an engine and a screeching of brakes. A motorcycle approached the car at high speed. Hyun-ha watched all this from a little distance. She didn't understand what was happening. The biker blocked the car's path and quickly got off the seat. He had a black mask on his face. Our heroine became agitated. Her body began to tremble involuntarily. She covered her mouth so as not to give away her presence. The stranger looked into the car. It was unclear what he wanted and what was happening. Our heroine tried to convince herself to calm down and not move. She should not get caught, but come to her senses. The girl tried to convince herself that this was the only way she could think rationally. But a gun appeared in the guy's hands. Sun-ho asked the stranger what he was doing. Blood was running down his face. He wiped it with his sleeve. The guy replied that he was just doing his job. Sun-ho was furious. After all, they had already finished the negotiations, and there were no more problems left. The stranger was surprised that he did not understand the jokes, and he confessed that he himself did not fully understand what was on the lady's mind. Sun-ho had fulfilled all the demands, and now they were to be released to go to Korea. But then he was hit in the face with a fist. The gun fell. Sun-ho fell to the asphalt from such a powerful blow. The boy hid behind his back in fear. Our heroine sat quietly holding her mouth. But by chance the pistol fell at her feet. She looked at the weapon in bewilderment. The criminal pushed Sun-ho to the ground. He pinned him down with his hand leaning on his shoulder. In his other hand was a gun. The barrel was pressed to the young man's forehead. Words of gratitude were spoken. The deafening sound of a shot, splashes of scarlet blood. Eun-ha realized that her new acquaintance had just been murdered, and if she didn't intervene, the child would be killed too. The gun was a few centimeters from the girl. She kept telling herself that she was crazy, but later she told herself that she had definitely decided to kill that criminal. And if she did decide to take that gun in her hands, she could save the child. She also understood how reckless it was to stand alone against the killer. Meanwhile, the boy was already being pulled by the hand. Eun-ha understood that the baby would definitely be killed next, and she decided to shoot the attacker. San-ho was no slouch either. He bit his father's killer hard and painfully on the arm. The latter dropped his gun in surprise. The boy took advantage of the confusion and tried to run away, but the killer's hand was ready to grab him by his thick hair. Eun-ha took advantage of the opportunity. She concentrated. She clenched her teeth. She held her breath. A shot rang out. The barrel of the gun began to smoke. The killer, Seon-ho, was clutching the bleeding wound on his shoulder. Our heroine told herself that if she could, she should have saved this boy. Eun-ha stepped out of the shadows. She kept her gun aimed at the criminal. She demanded that the crazy idiot move away from the child. Our heroine saw that although the criminal was alive, he was quite weakened by the bullet wound. She commanded the boy to come quickly. The child was holding the gun that his father's killer had dropped. He was shaking with fear. The criminal reached out to San-ho, but the kid dodged him in time, not allowing himself to be grabbed again. Eun-ha screamed for the boy to move away from the killer. She insistently demanded that he let the child go. Our heroine kept the criminal at gunpoint the entire time San-ho was running towards her. Soon the boy hid behind Eun-ha. She firmly pressed him to herself with her hand. At the same time, she did not take her eyes off the villain. The killer Sun-ho looked at the girl with a cloudy gaze. He did not know who she was, but he threatened that in the end she would regret what she had done today. Eun-ha got on the motorcycle. The boy sat behind her. She stepped on the gas, and the bike roared away. The boy, his eyes closed, tried to hold on tight. Our heroine stopped only when she found herself in another part of the city. Taking off her cap, she began to look back, fearing pursuit. But the road behind her was deserted. Clutching her head, she began to scold herself. After all, this could really be a big problem. Eun-ha thought she was crazy. She was insane. She was nuts and wanted to die. And now she was in a difficult situation. The girl brushed off the depressive thoughts. Something had to be done now. She decided to leave the motorcycle and continue on foot. But then a child pulled her clothes hard from behind. Eun-ha turned around. The baby hugged her, buried his face in hers, and began to cry hysterically. Here our heroine came to her senses. She pulled herself up short for getting so upset. After all, the boy was even more frightened compared to her. The girl apologized to San-ho. She assured him that she hadn't said all those words to him. He said that he had also encountered something like this for the first time and was scared. Eun-ha hugged him and offered to take him home now. But the baby silently shook his head. She asked if there was any adult who could take him. Again there was a negative answer. I asked if the boy knew the home phone number. Sanho just silently hugged his savior. The girl didn't know what to do in such a situation. But then it dawned on her. She had wandered around so much today and finally saw her home. She wondered if she should have taken the boy to his family first. Yoonha sat down and lifted the boy onto her back, and carried him like that. In response to his surprised look, she said that they would first go to her house. It was already getting dark. The windows of the house were lit with a warm light. Behind one of them in that house was our heroine. Yoonha told her guest that his injury was not serious, but if he had a headache or nausea, he should report it. The girl suggested that Sunny Ho take his medicine after he washed himself. She offered to help him with that. The kid only shook his head negatively. Sanho blushed and became embarrassed. He looked down at the floor. He said quietly that he could wash himself. Our heroine was surprised that the boy could speak. She patted his cheek, checked if he had a fever. She took him by the hand and led him to the bathroom. Soon there were 2 mugs of warm tea on the table, blue and yellow. And Yoonha brought her favorite cookies, hoping that her guest would like them too. After waiting for him, the girl began to drink the cooling drink. Soon Sanho appeared. She asked his permission to ask something. The boy was silent. He only sipped his tea loudly. Yoonha didn't know how to interpret his silence. Our heroine asked him what his name was, and asked him to introduce himself in order to avoid difficulties. And she told him her full name, Baek Yoonha. She waited for his answer. Lee Sang-ho introduced himself in a quiet voice as the little boy. The girl was tormented by doubts in her head, a bunch of questions. She wondered if he was hungry. The girl said something completely different from what she thought, and the boy thought she was strange, and he said it in English. Yoonha asked him to speak to her in Korean so she could understand. Sang-ho insisted that he hadn't said anything bad. The boy insisted that he couldn't answer her. After all, it could have happened even more dangerous. The girl asked what all this could mean. Dumb, said Sang-ho in English, and then in Korean that he said something bad. Yoonha couldn't understand. Why did she feel like the baby hated her? She decided to end it for today. It had been a busy day. She was tired, but Sang-ho grabbed her by the sleeve. He asked where she was going. The girl smiled awkwardly. She suggested ending the conversation for today and going to rest. But the boy asked her not to leave but to stay with him. Tears welled up in his eyes. Yoonha extended her hands to him. She asked him not to worry. She assured him that no one would hurt him here. The girl assured him that no one could hurt him in this place, and she promised to protect him if anything happened. She asked Sang-ho if he wanted to sleep. After all, so much had happened during the day. She assumed that the baby might be very tired, but the boy assumed that he might have had a bad dream. Yoonha offered to give him her dream catcher. She assured him that there would be no nightmares or bad events with him. She asked him not to worry but to fall asleep quickly. The girl handed her amulet to Sang-ho. He asked what to do if the killer came for him again. What if he killed Eun-ha the same way he killed his father? The girl was surprised that the baby was worried about her, and she asked him not to worry. Eun-ha, smiling, assured the boy that she was full of luck, and therefore she could not suffer. She promised not to die for anything. Sang-ho demanded that she promise, and the girl gave her word. She reminded him that he was little, and so she was going to protect the boy until he was safe, until he came home. But Sang-ho didn't like being treated like a child. He said that he had already entered elementary school, and he was in the 2nd grade. Yoonha tried to persuade him, consoled him in every way, and she also remembered her father's words, that they needed to come to an agreement that would be beneficial for each other. And then just as she protected Sang-ho, he could protect Yoonha. She asked if he agreed to do so. The boy climbed into her arms. He laid his head on her chest. He relaxed. But he still held the dream catcher in his hand. Yoonha decided to finish with the questions for today, and put it off until tomorrow. She carried the sleepy baby to the bed to put him to sleep. The light of the morning sun woke up our heroine. She sat up and stretched sweetly, but then she looked at the empty place where she had put the child she had saved to sleep the night before. He was not there, but the place was still warm. The girl assumed that Sang-ho had gone into the living room. She was curious about what attracted the boy there, and he took the TV remote. Yoonha took hold of the door handle. At that moment, the boy had already turned on the TV. The news channel just happened to be on. The announcer reported that a victim had been found, a man of about 30 years old, that the child who was with him had disappeared without a trace. They asked to contact with investigators. The boy got scared when he saw Eun-ha, and he decided to turn off the TV quickly. But she didn't let him do it. She asked him to wait a little. The breaking news was on. They were announcing that the child abductor's personal information had been discovered. They showed a photo of Eun-ha at the scene. The announcer asked the viewers to contact the investigative committee immediately if the boy was found. San-ho clenched his fists and shouted, "I don't want to!" The boy didn't want to go back. He threatened that if Eun-ha called, he wouldn't sit silently. With rage in his eyes, he threatened to kill. The rolled-up magazine hit the boy painfully on the neck. He cowered at the feet of his savior in pain. The man asked where it had been seen that a little girl would shower his niece with threats. Eun-ha began to explain and defend the little one. The girl was in a hurry and was confused, but her uncle asked her to be quiet. He scolded her for not returning by midnight, and thus forcing him to suffer until the morning. The man was furious, and he wanted to hear a clear justification for what he had just heard on the news. After the two children's confused story, the uncle calmed down a little. He sat down on the sofa. Eun-ha assured him that the baby was the son of the man who helped her yesterday. The uncle said that he did not know the details and asked the boy if he could answer all his and Eun-ha's questions. The girl started first. She asked what the boy had to do with that criminal. She assumed that the killer had come for San-ho. He denied it. Eun-ha wanted to understand why that man had started to stalk her and her father. It turned out that the criminal had been sent by Sang-ho's grandmother to take the child. And he knew that she would look for him through the ads in the news, but the baby did not want to come back. He knew that he would not be able to get out of there. He even agreed to die. Eun-ha thought this matter was dangerous and complicated. She asked him where he would like to return to. It turned out that his family lived on the island of Ladao. His parents lived there together, and today at dawn he and his father were planning to return there. Our heroine realized that everything was much more serious than she thought, but she could not understand why her grandmother, looking for San-ho, declared her a kidnapper. After all, there were surveillance camera recordings, and anyone could see that Eun-ha was actually protecting the boy. San-ho started biting his nails. He was clearly nervous. He said that was exactly what he didn't know. Our heroine began to calm the baby down. After all, even if she had taken him to his grandmother, her face had already been shown on the news, and that couldn't be changed. The boy asked for forgiveness, but it wasn't his fault. Eun-ha understood that nothing could be changed and that it would end anyway. San-ho was either asking or begging with apprehension. Would Eun-ha send him to his grandmother? The savior promised not to send him. After all, the boy himself did not want it, and she could not force him to do anything. Eun-ha insisted that she was not so heartless as to not take his wishes into account. Otherwise, she would have simply run away back then, at the moment of danger. Our heroine asked San-ho not to worry, and promised to take him to the house he himself wanted. But for now they had to be careful. Eun-ha asked him to be patient for a month. She saw that the boy was very happy. She also had to ask her uncle to change the flight to a plane. The plan to stay for a week was postponed due to San-ho's appearance. At first, the girl didn't like it very much, but at some point this time became insufficient. Hong Kong was a beautiful city, and San-ho was a sweet boy, and our heroine became friends with him. In the evenings, they went out onto the balcony. They talked about different things. They admired the night sky. They made many wonderful memories of each other over the course of a month. They tried to make a fire in the room. They studied on the computer. They barbecued in the yard. Soon a group photo of the three of them with her uncle appeared. Eun-ha never thought that the child she saved would become the main character that she would never forget. But sad as it was, the promised time quickly came. And the day came when San-ho set off for Landau Island by ship. Eun-ha was attaching a dream catcher to the boy's backpack. She was asking him to be careful on the road. She really didn't like saying goodbye. The girl asked her uncle not to make the child worry. If he cried, the baby might change his mind about returning home to his family. San-ho gave his uncle a handkerchief to blow his nose with, and then he hugged him tightly as he said goodbye. He asked him not to be angry with him. Uncle was sad that San-ho had become so grown up already. He asked him not to worry about him and to be careful, and he himself remained to wait for his niece to return. The waves rushed across the sea, whipping up white foam. The bow of the ship cut through the water element. Uncle waved goodbye. He wished San-ho not to get sick. He assured that he had a fun time with him. Eun-ha shouted that they would see each other again soon, and the boy wished his uncle not to get sick either. They waved their hands in response, saying goodbye. San-ho had a dream catcher hanging from his backpack. He was walking hand in hand with a student. He was happy because they were almost there. Yun-ha asked how long it had been since the boy had seen his family. It turned out that they had been separated for 3 years, and the boy was a little worried. San-ho was worried about whether his relatives were doing well. The student was interested in what the baby wanted to do first when his relatives met. The boy was at a loss for words at first. Then he said that he would first like to introduce Yun-ha to his family. His eyes shone with delight. San-ho assured that his grandparents would be happy to accept his savior, and they would definitely feed him something delicious until he was full. Yun-ha reminded that she had to board a plane that evening to return to her uncle, and she might not be able to do it if she overate. The boy decided that this was not right, and he was going to ask for some food for his girlfriend, although he would have been glad if she had stayed with him. And then they came. The kid pressed the intercom button. He said, addressing his grandmother, that it was he, San-ho, who had returned. But no one answered him. Afterwards, he started pounding on the door with his fist. He called for his grandma and grandpa. He demanded that they open the door for him right now. A resident looked out from the next door. He was indignant that they had been making noise since early morning. Yun-ha apologized and promised to behave more quietly. The student sat down under the door. She asked San-ho if this was the house, if this was the address the man had told him. The kid was upset. Tears came to his eyes. He assured me that he hadn't lied, that his dad had given him this address. Yun-ha began to console the boy. She stroked his head, calmed him down. In a gentle voice, she assured him that everything would be fine. The girl was sure that if his relatives were not at home now, they could have gone out on business, and she suggested to wait here for a bit. San-ho also sat down next to the door, agreed to wait. So the day will change to evening time. The sky is strewn with stars, and Yun-ha and the boy still did not wait for anyone at the door at the specified address. San-ho hid his face. He was quite upset, but the girl was not despondent. She assumed that his relatives might have gone far away, and she suggested going home today and returning here tomorrow. She reminded me that the ship was leaving soon. Yun-ha walked along the sidewalk with a boy by the hand. With the other hand, she was pushing a suitcase on wheels. The girl was afraid that they might be so late, and she suggested taking a taxi and going to the city. But then a gust of wind tore the dream catcher from the clasp of San-ho's backpack. He felt it and looked back. The amulet was lying on the roadway. The boy hurried to pick it up and ran out onto the road. Just then a car with a load was driving at high speed. When San-ho saw it, he couldn't move from the spot out of fear. Yun-ha reached out to save the baby from certain death. Time was ticking away. She grabbed him by the collar and hugged him. Yun-ha was asleep until she was awakened by the ringing of her phone. The device was ringing off the hook. Its screen was glowing. The girl complained about the noise, sat down, looked at the screen, realized that she had problems now. She needed to get ready and leave quickly. She wanted to forget him so much, forget how he died before her eyes 17 years ago. It was already light. The blue sky was visible through the window, and next to it hung a dreamcatcher amulet. Yun-ha quickly combed her hair. She tied it into a ponytail. She was tired. The girl tried to understand why. She had stayed too late yesterday. Or was it because of a dream she didn't want to see? She felt uneasy. There was a photo of her uncle and that boy on the table. It seemed to her that something bad was about to happen. The girl looked at the photo again. Then she came up and turned it over with the image facing down. Then her smartphone rang. Yun-ha took the call. She listened to the caller. She answered briefly that she would be there soon. They were saying something else to her over the phone. Our heroine was asking her not to cry and to calm down. She promised to arrive soon. That was her fate. One car was parked at the gate. Yun-ha drove up. She parked her car nearby. She got out, setting the alarm by pressing the key fob. A younger colleague was already hurrying towards her. There were tears in the girl's eyes. It was Lee Soo-jin, the head of the cleaning company Cleanliness. The girl pressed herself against Yun-ha's chest. She complained that she didn't know what to do with today's plot. After all, she had promised the client to clean the house by noon, and her partner was still not there by 10 o'clock. She had been crying since the morning, and threatened to fire him today. Yun-ha asked the girl to calm down first. After all, the director came to figure everything out herself. Yun-ha, at 37, was a manager. She had become much calmer than in her youth. The director was thinking that they had been cleaning this house for a long time, and their client lived abroad, so the house was empty. Lee Soo heard that the owner of the house returned to his homeland after finishing his studies a few months ago. She even saw him and thought he was handsome. The girl would like to continue to look after this house. There were not many rooms that needed cleaning. Then the conversation turned to the client's secretary. He was given orders every day. Another cleaning girl thought he was scary. It was on Yu Zhang, the company manager. Once the secretary came to the house and a very tense situation arose. He was rude, reacted sharply to everything, was impudent. That is why she felt anxious. An Yu shared that if he didn't like something, he would immediately flare up like fire. But Lee Soo also saw the secretary last time, and he didn't seem like that to her. Lee Soo felt responsible for this place, although it was a bit deserted. But even so, it was quite beautiful. Yu agreed with her. The three girls approached the client's house with their cleaning equipment. Hyunha took out the key. She said that they complained about the customer all the way here. She claimed that it was a bad habit. Having inserted the key into the lock, the director was surprised. The door was unlocked. Our heroine let out a cry of surprise. She turned to face the girls. She asked if they could have left the doors open yesterday. The employees admitted that it could have happened. But then a brunette in glasses opened the door. He asked who had come. He saw the director. He greeted him. It was Yu Jianwoo, one of the employees of their company. The young man asked the boss what brought her here. After all, she was not responsible for this facility today. Lee Soo wanted to know why the guy didn't pick up the phone when they called him so many times. She claimed that they had been waiting at the gate for a long time waiting for him. Yu Gunwoo tried to explain everything. It turned out that the three of them had been drinking and fooling around the previous day. Then the guy dropped his phone in the sewer, and it was like this. He was going to call a taxi, but Lee Soo was against anyone stopping her. She pushed her colleague, and then his phone went sailing. The young man was surprised that his colleagues did not remember this incident at all. The director grabbed her head, complaining about her bitter fate. Lee Soo asked for forgiveness. The guy suggested reprimanding her later, and now he called for her to get out. Soon the cleaning crew was already at work. Lee Soo was vacuuming. Yu Gunwoo was washing the floor, and today there were boxes to unpack. There was more work than usual. The young man assumed that someone had made a mistake, and as a result there was less time to complete the work. He said that the client was generous. Otherwise, Soo Jin, who was late, would have had to write an explanatory note. Hyunha shouted at them not to set up a kindergarten, but Yu Jung stood up for the kids. After all, it was more interesting to work with them that way. The director hadn't finished with the boxes yet, and she sent her colleague, who had already been released, to clean the kitchen. She suggested that they help each other. Lee Soo said that the living room had already been cleaned. She offered to help, but the director refused. She only had a few boxes to move. All three of the boys offered their help. They understood that it was hard for Yoon-ha to carry the luggage alone. But the director thought that there was little time for cleaning anyway. Lee Soo took on the task of cleaning the dressing room, and then offered her help. Gong Woo offered and immediately said that he needed to help. Yoon-ha was happy that she hired such good employees. Soon the cleaning team finished all the work. Our heroine was worried all the time that she had a bad dream. But she was glad that her fears were not justified. That's what she thought. But at that moment, someone was coming down the stairs. The stranger was holding on to the railing. Yoon-ha was just carrying another box up to the top floor. She heard footsteps. She looked up. The young man was walking down. Delicate features, dark eyes, slightly curly hair. Their eyes met. Confusion, surprise, sadness, and a mixture of emotions were in those eyes. That day there was an accident. Because of it, Yoon-ha had complications. And the boy, that night was his last. The boy's speech was interrupted, and being on the verge of death, he repeated words of regret, addressing Yoon-ha. The girl was curious about something. She couldn't ask him then. What he wanted to tell her at the moment he died. Yoon-ha almost fell down the stairs, but the young man deftly grabbed her by the waist. He pressed her to himself. But the girl couldn't hold the box, and everything that was in it scattered down the stairs. It seemed like time stopped moving when they looked at each other. The vase fell and broke into many pieces. The girl suddenly heard her world shatter. A hospital room. A bouquet of flowers on the nightstand. Yoon-ha was lying unconscious under a drip. An elderly woman was sitting next to her. The student called San-ho just after opening her eyes. The lady closed the thick book. She said that it was too late to look for her grandson. "He's dead," the stranger said coldly with just her lips. It seemed as if not a single muscle had moved on her face. Yoon-ha sat up abruptly and jumped out of bed. Her hand was clutching the blanket. The girl asked again, not believing her ears. The woman said that she should be grateful to the student. The victim did not understand what was being discussed. She replied that they would pay all the girl's hospital bills. She just wanted to make sure she was awake. And now it was time for her to go. The lady who called herself Grandma Sang-ho stood up and was about to leave. But Yoon-ha grabbed her sleeve. She asked her to wait. She had questions. The woman said the silly little boy pulled her out from under the car with his wounded body, fearing that she would die. And he died at the scene of the accident, having been crushed to death by a car. But Yoon-ha couldn't accept it. She screamed. She remembered how she pulled Sang-ho away from the car that was rushing towards him. The lady said that having grabbed the boy tightly, the would-be savior should not have fainted right on the road. From that moment on, Yoon-ha's world was no longer the same. Compared to others, it became noisier. She suffered more from anxiety, and she wished that the alarm, the noise, and herself would be swallowed by darkness. Fatigue appeared. There was no longer a desire to try, but apparently it was God's will. And Sang-ho himself did not want it, so that there would not be something that would swallow her up. Yoon-ha sat up. She tried to hold the compress that the young man had carefully placed on her head. She looked around. She tried to understand where she was. She handed her a cup of hot tea. The boy offered Yoon-ha a drink. She recognized him as the grown-up Sang-ho. The guy smiled broadly and friendly. He was interested in how she felt. Suddenly, the girl felt an insistent look. Yoon-ha took the cup from his hands. Their fingers touched. There was a feeling that she was wrong, and it bothered her. The boy had a calm manner of speech. In appearance, he was very similar to Sang-ho. One wondered if that boy would grow up to be as big. Yoon-ha began to reproach herself and shame herself for her illusions about the child who had died long ago because of her. She considered herself ridiculous. That boy couldn't come back to life. The girl remembered the mourning photo, the grieving people. She even went to the funeral. And she couldn't believe what had happened. After finishing her tea, Yoon-ha put down the empty cup. She shook off her numbness. She asked how long she had been unconscious. The young man squinted. He said he wasn't sure, but it seemed to him that more than 1,000,000 years had passed. He was trying to make a joke. Failed. They didn't understand him. He admitted that he was worried about her, that she hadn't come to her senses for a long time, and he was glad that she wasn't hurt. Yoon-ha noticed that his character was different, and his laughter too. The young man offered to bring her some more milk tea. Our heroine wondered what that was. And was she imagining it? Yoon-ha assured him that she just wanted to know who he was, and to thank him for taking care of her. The guy assumed that the director had a lot of questions for him. He assured that he would also be interested in learning a lot of things. He assumed that they would have to face each other often. After all, there would be frequent cleaning here. Yoon-ha bit her lips. She was worried that this was no longer permissible. She promised herself that she would just ask one thing and finish. She doubted that she had suddenly misremembered what had happened on that fateful day. She began her question hesitantly, but she was interrupted. Lee-soo rushed to the director with tears in her eyes. Our heroine could not understand how her employee ended up there. The colleague rushed to hug her boss. She asked if she had hurt herself when she fell down the stairs. Her answer was negative. Yoon-ha apologized for causing concern, and Soo-jin expressed her joy that her director was healthy. The cleaning company employee told her boss that she was a doctor and helped the girl a lot. Yoon-ha asked her to speak more slowly and calm down. Lee-soo continued to take the initiative. She introduced the guy. He was the owner of this house, and at the same time a client of their cleaning services. The guy's name was Shin Noel. While the director was resting, he helped with cleaning, took care of some chores, and had no intention of filing a complaint. While Yoon-ha was falling down the stairs, several things broke. A laptop, a watch, and a vase. Not just any vase, but a national treasure. Baekje-era ceramics. Our heroine thought that life was unpredictable. When she did not think about the past, she faced great suffering. Shin Noel assured that he would not demand compensation for the damage caused, but he wanted her to fulfill one of his requests. And there was a small threat in the package. If the girl refused, the company would be responsible for the damage caused. Our heroine, rubbing her head, sleepily walked down the corridor. But then the door suddenly opened, almost knocking her off her feet. Shin Noel was surprised that she had gotten up so early. The girl assured him that she didn't usually wake up at such an hour. The young man admitted that he had not been able to fall asleep. He blamed the time difference. That was why he had gotten up early. He offered her coffee. Soon they were drinking their morning pick-me-up in the living room. Yoon-ha was wondering where she should start cleaning the house today. The young man replied that he didn't know. He admitted that he hadn't thought about it yet. After all, it all happened unexpectedly. Shin Noel still suggested introducing some rules. Since that's how it's already happened, these would be rules for those who live together. And this concerned cleaning. Yoon-ha wondered if those rules would be much different from the cleaning requirements they had been working under before. The young man said that it just so happened that they lived together, and he considered it necessary to add a few points. Our heroine was interested in whether the changes and additions had been thought out. After all, she would need to familiarize herself with them in advance. Noel had planned to prepare such a document and send it to the company, but now he only had a couple of points in mind. The first was, don't go into his bedroom. And another one was, no matter what the worker hears, don't go up to the 3rd floor. Eun-ha was convinced that the guy was not Sang-ho. She wondered why there were such restrictions. She noticed that she felt some fear towards the guy, which I never felt towards that child. I asked him to explain because I didn't know where I could run away and where I couldn't. The young man assured that he did not want to be caught by the one with whom he shared personal space every day. The girl wondered if it wasn't Sang-ho, then why he was acting like that. Her thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. Yoon-ha apologized to her employer. She answered the incoming call. It was work-related. The director answered the subscriber that there was another person in charge there today, but it turned out that the new employee had run away. The girl sighed heavily. She covered her face with her hand in helplessness. There was a problem, and something had to be done. The cleaning director was thinking. There was no one who could urgently go to work. Noel offered his help. Yoon-ha glanced at the young man. He assumed that they needed a worker, but he had nothing to do anyway, and work was exactly what was needed. And he offered to help the girl with her work. She couldn't understand why the client needed it. He replied that in addition to wealth, he also valued work. But in reality, he was simply bored. Such a proposal was rather suspicious. But Yoon-ha said that she would gladly accept his help. She told herself to stop thinking about this guy. The director said that they were paid hourly. She didn't promise to pay much. Noel thanked her for getting the job so easily. The object of cleaning was the establishment Café Eden. The cleaning team worked hard. Shin Noel also coped quite skillfully. The director looked at him in surprise. She asked if it had been difficult for him. The young man assured her that everything had been fine. There had been nothing difficult. Yoon-ha apologized. This didn't fit with her image of the master. She was surprised that he was so experienced in cleaning. The young man said that as soon as he was old enough to earn extra money, he took any available job. He felt uncomfortable taking money from his parents, so he started earning his own and quickly learned everything. It turned out that he was inclined to physical labor. He lived alone for a long time. His parents were in another country, and they had enough of their own problems. So Yoon-ha didn't have to worry about him. The cleaning director admitted that she had said something stupid. She offered to take the garbage bags together. Our heroine reasoned with herself that now she must admit that Sang-ho was dead, and that this man was not him. It was just her stupid wish that that child was alive. She decided from today on to cast aside the memories that brought her pain. Yoon-ha told herself to stop thinking like a fool. After all, the old way was over now. She convinced herself to live as if nothing had happened. She could no longer hold on to the past. The girl was walking across the road, lost in her thoughts, and she didn't see the car approaching her. And seeing the blinding light of the headlights, she suddenly remembered the moment when she pulled Sang-ho out from under the car. Then someone grabbed her and pulled her towards him with a strong hand. Shin Noel pushed the girl onto himself, thus saving her from being run over by a car. The girl was just now scared. Mr. Noel asked if she was okay. Eun-ha jumped away from him. She immediately got to her feet. Adrenaline dictated her behavior. To escape, Noel approached the girl. He said that she had hurt her face while rolling on the ground. He began to examine her, to see if she was hurt anywhere else. He asked how the girl felt. The boy fussed around Yoon-ha, and she compared his face with the face of that boy Sang-ho. She was in a trance. Different voices were calling her. Her workers were calling her too, and Mr. Noel. But the girl couldn't move or answer them. Our heroine opened her eyes with difficulty and saw the white ceiling of the hospital room. The woman was screaming. Mr. Noel reminded her that she was in the hospital, and there was no need to make such noise here. Han Jae-yi asked him what kind of strange hobby he had. Dying and coming back to life, shaking him by his clothes. The girl demanded that Noel not sit there, but go to the doctor for a checkup. Only then did the couple notice that Yoon-ha had come to her senses. The young man asked how she felt. She assured him that everything was fine with her, and she also asked if Mr. Noel was okay. But Jae-yi answered for the young man, pushing him away. She said that the stubborn man needed to go to the doctor now. She asked him to make him go for a checkup. Yoon-ha assured that she was fine, and Mr. Noel could take care of his health without any worries. Shin Noel left the ward, but before that he asked to tell him in case Yoon-ha got worse. The hospital employee escorted the gentleman to the examination room. The girls watched him go. Jae-yi was the first to speak. She said that neither Yoon-ha nor Noel were seriously hurt, and that was a great blessing. There was no need to worry about minor scratches. The driver of that car was also scared, and he agreed to pay all the hospital bills. The girl advised Yoon-ha to take advantage of the opportunity and undergo a full examination. Our heroine concluded from the conversation that Mr. Noel had already been in an accident, to which she was met with a disapproving look, and she began to justify herself by saying that she didn't want to provoke complications with him because of the past. Jae-yi asked him to forget. This wasn't kept a big secret. The girl asked not to worry about Noel. She assured him that he had lost his memories after the accident, but no other consequences were noticed. Jae-yi suggested that the victim take better care of herself, and she recommended that she also go for a full checkup. Our heroine began to think. There was a fact of the loss of memory of the young men after the accident, and she only heard about the death of San-ho, but she did not see it with her own eyes. Eun-ha suggested that the boy might not have died that day. He might not have died but simply lost his memory, and lived on as Shin Noel. The girl asked herself what was the point of her worrying about this alone. Lee Sang-ho, who became Shin Noel, forgot everything that happened before the accident, and now he was alive and well. The young man returned after the examination. He asked Eun-ha about her health. She thanked him for saving her. Noel assured that he himself was not hurt. The girl reproached herself that every time she remained in his debt, therefore she wanted to pay him back for it. The young man's next request stunned Eun-ha. After all, he asked her to hire him. The director of the cleaning company was surprised. The young man reminded her that she was going to pay him back. Noel had heard that it was hard to find a job in this country. She could help with that. The young man sighed and became sad. He felt that his request was too difficult. Yoon-ha assured him that this was not the case. Our heroine was thinking. Since she didn't want to cross paths with him anymore, then refusing would be the right decision. But on the other hand, this could be her chance. After all, it was time to stop deceiving herself and being angry. So Yoona decided that she would just check, and voiced her consent. She decided to keep the boy close to her, and check if he really was San-ho who had lost his memories after the accident, or if it was a guy, just similar to him. And we'll check everything that concerned him. Yoon-ha stated that, however, she had conditions. It was already dark. The car with the lights on parked near the house. Yoon-ha thanked Mr. Noel for giving her a ride. She said goodbye smiling. She was glad that she had arrived safely. The young man wanted to go with her. Jae-yi pulled him by the sleeve. She asked him to wait. They smiled and quietly said something to each other. They were saying goodbye. Yoona thought that these two were probably dating as a couple. Soon the car left, and Noel suggested to come in. His voice brought the girl out of her reverie, and she followed the gentleman. Already entering his room, the guy asked when he could go to work. The director of the cleaning company replied that he could start tomorrow. He had to come to the office in the morning, draw up a contract, and start training. Yoon-ha informed the young man that he would be studying under her supervision during his internship. He obediently agreed. The girl was going to go to bed early today. She said so. She suggested discussing everything tomorrow morning, and that's how they parted. Entering her room, our heroine collapsed on the bed. She was terribly tired that day, although she decided to stay close to this mysterious guy in order to find out some details about him. But in fact, when the girl thought that she would see him again tomorrow, she became very worried. But fatigue took its toll, and the girl, having driven away all doubts, told herself that she would definitely cope. And then she fell fast asleep. 17 years ago in Hong Kong, a student sat against the wall next to 2 laundry baskets. She listened to music on her phone. She turned up the volume and put the device on the floor. But suddenly she felt strange. She suddenly felt uneasy. At that moment she was being watched. Soon she noticed that San-ho was looking out from the balcony door. She assumed that the child wanted to tell her something. She said that she needed to hang up the towels. The boy offered to help her. Hyun-ha assured him that she would be grateful for that. She asked him to come over and show her how to do it. The kid agreed. San-ho listened carefully and tried to do everything correctly as he was taught. Since the day they suddenly decided to live together, the boy helped around the house. He was well-mannered and calm. There were moments when he seemed more mature than his peers. He took on everything and was charming. San-ho even washed the dishes. Uncle assured that the boy did not have to do this, but the little boy assured that everything was fine and he would definitely cope. He was barely tall enough to reach the kitchen sink, and the little boy was forced to stand on his tiptoes and stretch out his arms. But there is no child in the world who would obey and please all adults. One day a boy was lying on his bed all red and shaking. Our heroine touched the child's forehead. He clearly had a high temperature. She applied a cold compress to him. He said he was fine, but Yoon-ha didn't leave him. She was worried that the temperature wasn't going down, and there were clearly problems with the boy's voice. She called him to go to the hospital, but he refused to go to the doctor. He sat up abruptly and started screaming. He didn't want to be begged, and he demanded that they stop doing this. San-ho's body was shaking. The girl assured him that she understood that he didn't want it and didn't like it. The boy screamed again. He asked her to admit that she was simply fed up with him and that she was tired of him, and that she wanted him to disappear from her life. Yoon-ha denied everything she had said. The child asked why she had continued to beg. After all, he had said that nothing had hurt. San-ho said that he didn't want to disturb her, and that he was actually pretending. The child started crying. The student started to console him. The boy asked her not to leave, and not to throw him away. He grabbed his clothes tightly. Yoon-ha hugged him and pressed him to herself. She promised that she wouldn't, but she asked San-ho to listen to one of her requests in turn. The boy cried that if they don't go to the hospital, then they will definitely need to take one medicine. There was a bowl of food, a glass of milk, and an empty packet of medicine on the table. The boy looked less red. It seemed as if the fever had gone down. San-ho wanted to tell the girl something. He reached out to her with his hand, pulled her close, asked for forgiveness. Hyun-ha suggested going outside the next day. The boy couldn't believe his ears and asked again. The girl said she wanted to go out and have fun. She later thought that there could be consequences for her carelessness. The next day they camouflaged themselves well. Yoon-ha was happy about the good weather. The boy looked at her with apprehension. He decided that she really was crazy. Afterwards, they decided to go out for lunch. Yoon-ha enjoyed every bite. The boy was tense and did not share the excitement. While the student was cutting her order on the plate, San-ho was drinking a hot drink. He was hot. While the girl turned away, the boy tried to reach for her cold orange drink. But Yoon-ha noticed in time and forbade him to take it. The baby complained about the heat and asked for something cold to drink. He was only allowed warm milk tea. Yoon-ha herself drank orange juice through a straw. And she said that the boy had caught a cold in the summer. Yesterday he was still sick, and today he was going to drink something cold. San-ho gave up. He couldn't understand what had happened to his girlfriend today. She was starting to irritate him. Hyun-ha dragged him outside even though he didn't want to go out. Since yesterday she hadn't listened to what he said. It made him angry. The student thought it was strange. After all, the boy was looking at everything with such surprise that it seemed to her that he was interested. San-ho started shouting. He asked when they would leave. He started behaving intrusively. This attracted unnecessary attention to them. The boy blushed. Yoon-ha suggested that if he was embarrassed, he should cover his face with a newspaper. And when he did, the student started laughing. Still having fun, the girl offered San-ho some soup. She said that the dish was delicious. He needed a good meal before the long walk. He refused. He asked why he had come here. Yoon-ha didn't understand. She asked again. The boy thought it was dangerous to walk the streets. San-ho reminded that because of him, she was now on TV. They could have been reported and then caught by the police. The boy admitted that even if they were lucky enough to escape the police, there could have been a danger of being recognized by the killer. San-ho didn't want to get caught, and he didn't understand why he would leave the house in such a situation. Our heroine thought about it. She wondered if the children had been much more perceptive lately, or if it was just San-ho. She knew the boy was genuinely scared, but they were already here. They had to be careful not to get caught. She took a piece of fruit from the plate and cheerfully declared that she would like to eat a pineapple. San-ho remained tense. His friend wondered why he was looking at her like that. Hyun-ha asked the boy to trust her and have fun, and she offered to take her hand as a sign of agreement. The little boy did so. The student suggested not to worry about anything and have fun from the heart. The boy remained gloomy but nevertheless gave in to persuasion. Afterwards, they ate craft bread. Sanho was stubborn at first, but when he tried it, he really liked it. Then they went to a souvenir shop. Eunha offered to take a photo. She took different strange poses. The boy refused at first, but then he gave in to persuasion. The girl treated Sanho to manti. The boy admitted that it was delicious. He finally started to smile. Afterwards, the children walked along the street. The smile never left the child's face. He finally relaxed and began to have fun with his friend. The sun was already setting. The sky and everything around were turning scarlet. It was getting dark. Sanho and Eunha sat down on a bench tiredly. The girl took off her wig. She said that it was nicer and fresher without it. The boy was serious. The student was glad that he enjoyed the walk. The girl noticed that for a long time Sanho tried to imitate her and his uncle, and she was worried that the child could be overtired. She asked him to be sincere with them. She didn't want the child to miss out on childhood while he was responsible for everything as an adult. She asked the boy not to try to look older, but to be himself. The boy turned away and began to look out the window. The city with its buildings and the golden colors of the sunset was visible. Again, Sanho said what his friend didn't understand English. He said that she really was weird. The girl concluded that he did that in unpleasant situations. He denied it. Eunha realized that the boy was pretending not to understand. She noticed the beautiful view from the window. She was delighted. Sangho said he wouldn't repeat it. He said, Eunha Nuna. The boy's back, who always acted like an adult, seemed at that moment. Our heroine is as small as the backs of his peers. This boy has experienced something that is difficult for children to cope with. Although he had grown up, he was no different from them. Looking at this dazzling sunset, Eunha suddenly felt like crying. 37-year-old Eunha opened her eyes. Next to her, a young man was dozing on the floor. At some point, she felt very calm. The last time she had a nightmare. And this had never happened before. And she was glad that at least it wasn't a nightmare like usual. And she wanted to have dreams like today's from now on. She didn't want to see Sanho's death in her dreams again and again. Only those beautiful memories that seemed to have already been erased from her memory. The girl quietly called Sanho. The young man woke up and opened his eyes. Their faces were so close to each other. The young man took Eunha's hand. He came even closer to her. It seemed like he was going to kiss her. The girl muttered something unintelligible and punched him in the nose. A scream escaped. The guy fell. There was a knock at the door. Eunha apologized and entered. She introduced Mr. Shin Noel to her colleagues. She stated that he would be on their team from today on. Sniffling his nose, which had been broken yesterday, the young man greeted the staff in a friendly manner. Many glances were directed at the young man, and also silent, unspoken questions of new colleagues to the boss and the newcomer. Eunha was about to go crazy. She reproached herself for hitting him yesterday and not taking care in the morning to make it less noticeable. The director reminded that, as she had said earlier, there would be a welcoming party today. Therefore, she asked everyone to finish work on the sites on time. Eunha said that Kwon's manager would show them the workplace later. Now they had to sign the contract. The director apologized to Mr. Noel. She was surprised to read the information about his age. It stated 25 years. The young man confirmed. He asked if there was a problem with that. She began to recall the age difference with Sanho. It came out to 12 years. Eunha assumed that they were making fun of her. It irritated her. She thought that the young man was flirting with her. But he had a girlfriend. Then her phone rang. The director urged him to sign the contract. And then the manager would show Noel his workplace. The employee showed the new guy around. Showed him his desk. Said he had prepared it since the morning. Asked him to speak up if he needed anything. A colleague asked Noel if he had heard what he was supposed to be doing. The young man replied that he had been aware that he was part of a team for which the director was responsible. This is how the new guy met Kwon Jae-gen. The manager was over 50 years old. Noel claimed he was not aware of the details. Kwon promised to explain the duties to the newcomer instead of Director Baek. In this cleaning company, different teams were responsible for different tasks. Team A was responsible for cleaning houses. Team B was responsible for cleaning businesses. And the director's team, which Noel was assigned to, was responsible for cleaning up the belongings of the deceased. The manager said that since the company's team was not large, The teams often helped each other. Kwon asked the boy not to worry about his lack of skills. The director would explain everything to him in detail before sending him to the site. The manager asked if Noel had been drinking. He confirmed it. Ji Gang advised him to feel calm. This company never forced you to go to corporate parties and get drunk. So you shouldn't force yourself to drink alcohol. You can only eat snacks. The new guy thanked him for his advice and introduction to the situation. He said that he would be glad to receive instructions from him in the future. The manager compared the young man with other young people. Noel could speak beautifully and had a wonderful character. He was giving a compliment. He promised to take care of the newcomer. Looking at his watch, he was horrified that he was already late. He wished him luck. He said goodbye until he met him at the party. There was meat being grilled on the barbecue. The table was generously laid. The young man asked Mr. Noel how he had met their director. It was Kim Do-yoon, a young employee of the cleanliness company. Red-haired with cheerful green eyes, always in a good mood. Kim poured alcohol for the new guy. He asked the wrong guy to play dumb. He noticed that the young man had been taken into the company rather suddenly, and that Yoon-ha went home with him. And then a lot of personal questions arose. How long had they known each other? Where did they meet? Was it love? But then another colleague shut the mouth of the young man, who was being overly curious. But even in this state, he justified himself by saying that everything was interesting. The girl asked for forgiveness. Her name was So-chan. She was in her 30s and a manager at the cleanliness company. Another girl was surprised that the new boy had already been taken care of. She asked Noel if he liked this kind of care. The third employee suggested that Mr. Noel must have been happy to have such caring senior colleagues. The young man modestly thanked her for her concern. The girl gasped at how handsome he was. Hyun-ha stepped in to save the situation. She asked Miss Yoo-jung if they should have ordered anything else. The guy ordered 5 portions of beef, but the red-haired Kim thought that their table had enough. Then they suggested ordering the same amount of pork. But So-chung asked who could eat that much, and she started jokingly strangling her colleague. But they still ordered another bottle of beer. Our heroine began to get tired of all the noise, and she suddenly wanted to go home. The new guy stood up. He said he had to go to the bathroom for a while. Yoon-ha followed his gaze. It bothered her. She saw that the young man had received some message, and his face immediately changed. She assumed that something bad had happened. One of her colleagues called out to the director, bringing her out of her reverie. Yoon-ha didn't even notice how she spilled soda on the table. Our heroine began to apologize to Lee-soo and rushed to wipe it with a napkin. The girl assured her boss that the puddle had not yet reached her. But assuming that the manager was tired, she suggested that she go home early. And she said that Mr. Noel had already left after notifying her about an important matter. Hyun-ha was surprised when he had already managed to do so. Soo-jin couldn't believe that she hadn't heard. Our heroine became worried. The colleague was wondering if Baek Yoon-ha really wanted to stay longer, and she thought that she had had enough for today. And then the director, waving goodbye to everyone, left first. Colleagues said goodbye to her until Monday. A short time later, our heroine was already at the house. She stepped over the threshold, trying not to make noise. Seeing Noel, she was surprised that he had also just arrived. The young man assured her that if he had known, they could have returned together. Hyun-ha hesitated. But still, stuttering, she asked him where he was going at this hour, dressed like that. Noel replied that he hadn't planned it at all. But suddenly he had business. He promised to return soon. He expected to return late. He asked Yoon-ha not to wait for him but to go to bed. With that, they said goodbye. The glasses were sparkling clean and waiting for visitors to fill them with drinks. The bartender at the counter was fulfilling the orders of the visitors. At this time, a guy in white sneakers entered the hall. The hall was already waiting for him. This young man was dressed in a classic suit, a red tie and black gloves on his hands. He greeted Shin Noel, who approached him. He replied reservedly that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. He asked Yahan what happened to his hair. He twirled a lock of hair near his ear. He narrowed his eyes slyly. He assured me that it was not difficult to tell. But he knew that Noel did not like useless conversations, and there was no need to exchange pleasantries. The group of guys at the table silently looked at each other questioningly. Standing up together, they announced that they were going to have fun. They left the guys alone. Noel sat down and asked his interlocutor why he came to Korea. After all, he thought that Yahan would stay in America. He replied that she wanted to visit his dear younger brother. He sipped alcohol, squinted slyly, and winked with one eye. Noel asked not to spoil his mood, but to talk about the matter. His brother said that he saw no need to be shy, and if he missed him, he could hug him. Jahan laughed a little and made fun of his interlocutor. But it was time to get down to business. He reminded him of Noel's request to him. He threw the folder and the photos on the table, asked if that was enough, said he had no doubt that Noel could handle it, but he asked to tell him if he suddenly needed his help. He promised to take care of everything personally. Noel rubbed his eyes sleepily. He looked at Yoon-ha sitting on the floor in surprise. She was rubbing her head. He asked if she was okay. The girl entered the balcony carrying 2 cups of hot drink. She suggested having coffee together. Noel happily agreed. There was a pause. Yoon-ha thought that she shouldn't have spoken up, but she couldn't just walk by. She didn't want to pretend. But she knew that something bad had happened that night. The girl noticed that Noel was acting strange today, but she didn't know if she had the right to ask about it. Yuna started the conversation on a neutral topic. She said that the sun was so beautiful today. Her hand shook, spilling coffee. The girl assured him that it would be a shame to stay home on such a day. Noel thought to himself that he had planned to sit at home all day. The young man asked if the director was really going to go somewhere. He was surprised that she was so dressed up. She wanted to take a walk, taking advantage of the opportunity. Jun-ha noticed that the guy was sad. She was planning to go alone, but circumstances changed her plans. And since Mr. Noel had no plans, she suggested that he go for a walk too. A sad look was directed at our heroine. Eun-ha couldn't resist such a face. Suddenly the young man smiled widely. He said that he wanted and was ready to go for a walk with her. Soon our heroine and the young man went to the nearest park. There were quite a lot of vacationers that day. Shin Noel sat on a bench under a tree. He was thoughtful. He waited with his legs stretched out. Then a candy on a stick appeared in front of his face. He was genuinely surprised. Eun-ha cheerfully offered him an ice cream. She held one out to him as a treat, and was about to enjoy the other one herself. Noel hesitantly took the cold sweet. He thanked her. He assured her that he would enjoy it. The girl also sat down on the bench nearby. She noted to herself that San-ho also really liked this ice cream. It turned out that even the tastes were the same. Our heroine stayed close to the young man on purpose to observe him. But she didn't notice anything unusual. There were many things she didn't understand. When the accident happened, Shin Noel saved her by pulling her out from under the wheels of the car. From the very first day of work, they were always together. And she could not even imagine that the owner of the house looked like San-ho. Instead of Yoon-ha, her uncle came to sign the contract. This meant that he had to cross paths with the owner of the move, Noel. But then Uncle didn't even show that Mr. Noel was so similar to San-ho. Our heroine found this rather strange, and the fact that the young man had suddenly gotten a job with her. It seemed that he was trying to become closely involved in her life. It was also surprising that they exchanged glances so often. The girl felt awkward about it. Noel wondered why she was looking at him like that. She assumed there was something on his face, and he started feeling himself up, looking for it. Hyun-ha said that she was wondering why he decided to come to her company. After all, his resume was excellent. Licensed, military experience, graduated with a degree in business administration, list of certificates. She wondered why she had to get a yacht license. Noel smiled. He said there was no reason for it. The young man insisted that he had already told her everything about himself. Yoon-ha decided to pretend that she didn't know anything, and asked if he liked this kind of ice cream. Noel said it tasted like milk. The girl replied that it wasn't the color of milk, and that she liked it too. Yoon-ha concluded that they had similar tastes. Having finished the sweets, they went along the busy path to the center of the park. There, our heroes decided to test themselves on various attractions. First, they went to the shooting range. Yoon-ha said that she competed for the country as a child, and it came easy to her. Then they came to the counter with gingerbread. Noel thought they looked delicious. The girls suggested trying them. The sun was already setting. Yoon-ha pointed with her hand. She said that there was a bookstore there. She wanted to go there. The guy agreed. Soon they entered the room. Before them opened up a view of many shelves with books. During the time she hadn't looked in here, many books had come out. They looked interesting. She wondered, was it worth buying one? Yoon-ha looked at her companion. He was leafing through a book in a green polished paper with interest. She asked him if he liked the book. The young man replied that it turned out to be more interesting than he had expected. Our heroine was surprised that Noel liked novels of this genre. He said he had heard stories like that from his sister. That's probably why he got used to them. He liked it. Sun-ha asked him to recommend her something. She said that she wanted to buy a book today. The young man did not know what genre she liked. Our heroine replied that she liked exciting stories. The young man concluded that she was bolder in her tastes than he had assumed. Noel showed a book with an unusual title. The cover was bright and interesting. He asked Yoon-ha's opinion about this edition. Then he began to show her another one. He said that it told about the secret relationship of the young gentleman and his brother's wife. Yoon-ha took it as a joke. The young man denied it. He asked why he had to joke like that. The girl thought he was shameless, but she saw that he had relaxed and was having fun. Now everything seemed to be in order. Afterwards, our heroes sat down at a table. 2 cups of cappuccino stood there. Yoon-ha said that it was time to go home. It was already late. Noel admitted that he was indeed tired, but he enjoyed the way he spent the day, and he offered to buy something on the way home to have a snack. The girl agreed, but then a boy running past suddenly pushed her. She didn't expect this at all, and she started to fall, losing her balance. But Noel didn't let her fall, and deftly caught her by the waist. Yoon-ha looked up at the boy. It felt like this had happened to her before. She wondered what kind of memory it was. She wondered if she had met Mr. Noel in the past, and why this situation seemed so familiar to her. At this point, the girl's phone rang in her pocket. She immediately hurried to answer the incoming call. The director apologized to Mr. Noel. She wondered if he would be able to go to work right away. The young man's eyes widened. He was surprised. It was already late, almost night outside. Yoon-ha nodded in response. Our heroine saw this landscape for the first time. It was a dream. She could not understand what kind of place it was. She admitted that it could be her memory again. The girl saw herself from the outside. She said that, to tell the truth, she was worse than she actually looked. That's how it seemed to her. The boy held her close. Yoon-ha wondered if it was Mr. Noel. The director woke up in the front passenger seat of the car. She tried to understand herself and the situation. Mr. Noel was driving. Yoon-ha tried to understand why the young man appeared in her dream. He asked if the director was awake yet. He smiled sweetly at her. He asked why she called him. The white car parked at the right address. The headlights were turned off. A couple wearing the cleaner's rubber boots were getting out of the car. When our heroes entered the gate, they were called out. A colleague was calling the new arrivals. Yoon-ha was surprised that he arrived earlier than expected. He assured that he left for the site immediately after the call. The man said that he was scared last night, and since the morning his heart was not in place. A colleague opened the door of the facility for cleaning. He assured that the place was not particularly dirty. He said that according to rumors, neighbors often came here. The grandchildren lived together, so they quickly discovered it. Yoon-ha asked if the family members were okay. The colleague replied that he wanted it to be that way. He suggested getting down to business already. The director of the blade company cast a professional glance at the object for today's order for their professional cleaning. Standing at the threshold, they said the now traditional phrase before starting such work. It was something like a short prayer for the repose of the soul. Yoon-ha opened the drawer. She took out a bag with a bright picture. The men were sorting through things, putting them in boxes. The director was already taking out the garbage bags. Usually the workload was heavy, but the number of employees increased, and she had time to think. Similar situations arose as déjà vu. It happened that way with the dream that she dreamed about it today. The girl had problems with memories, but not to such an extent. Yoon-ha was tired of these thoughts, and there were no answers to her questions. She decided that she had to move on. Returning from her thoughts, her gaze focused on the furniture. She decided to move the cabinet to the window. There was no time to stand still. It was necessary to clean up the site as quickly as possible. But at the same time, Noel grabbed the cabinet and asked if the director was really going to move it alone. The boy thought it looked bulky and heavy. Yoon-ha didn't understand why he had such a confused expression. The director said that the new guy was still young, and adults were supposed to do this. Noel recalled that he was already 25 years old. He considered himself a grown man. The director agreed with the opinion, and as an alternative, she suggested moving the furniture together. She thought that moving such things alone would be difficult. Noel assured that this cabinet was small, and he could move it alone. He asked where to move it. The director ordered to carry it to the window. Taking the furniture, the young man carried it with ease, and asked to move away as it could be dangerous. Yoon-ha was about to go crazy. Even though they looked alike, it was impossible to confuse people to such an extent. Noel asked if it was okay to throw it down the stairs, and the girl understood that he was still a 9-year-old boy in her eyes. Even though they look similar, How could San-ho become Mr. Noel? The young man was so similar to the very child who needed her help so much, and she really didn't know what to do next. There was a misunderstanding. She wasn't interested in younger guys, and she certainly wasn't interested in someone who looked so much like the little boys she knew. Suddenly a colleague came in. He asked Director Beck to come over, but noticing the atmosphere, he decided that he was intruding, and he said that he would come in later. The girl replied that she felt even more awkward. The man insisted that he was just joking. He said that they had brought things, and asked someone to help carry them in. The cleaning team was deciding who would bring what. They decided to go together. But suddenly Noel suggested that he would bring it in himself, and he suggested that his colleagues take a rest for now. The older employee was surprised that a newbie would do something like that alone. He asked if it would be difficult for him. He offered to help. Shin Noel assured that he was a much stronger man than he looked and promised to return soon. Soon the young man went out into the yard, and the subordinate began to ask Yoon-ha if the two of them had really quarreled. The girl insisted that they were not children to fight at work. She changed the subject. She asked how her colleague was feeling, whether his back hurt. The man confirmed. He added that since the young guy went to bring in the things, everything was fine, and he could work for another 100 years. The director said that the employee was a friend of her uncle's, and she asked if the aunt would be angry because he had picked up all sorts of things from him. Meanwhile, Yoon Jin-hyun couldn't understand why his ears were itching. It was because someone was talking about him. It was his friend and his niece. Yoon-ha felt that she really should have told him about all his tricks. He wondered where the girl got such a similar person from. She asked again. The colleague clarified that he meant the newcomer. He noticed that the boy looked exactly like the child Yoon-ha had lived with when she was a child. The girl asked what they were talking about. The man supposed that he was beginning to seem too smart for someone who was usually not smart. He didn't understand why Yoon-ha kept the guy with her, but he asked her to abandon all hope. The girl assured that it was a misunderstanding, and she was again overwhelmed by a wave of memories. A family friend advised her not to ignore it and let the guy go. Touching her shoulder, he asked her not to delay. Soon Noel appeared. Smiling, he asked the director where he would put what he had brought, and our heroine was still comparing him to San-ho in her thoughts. Yoon-ha touched the young man's shoulder, leaned over him, stroked his cheek, moved her face closer to his. It seemed that the girl was about to kiss him. But then, losing control of herself, she fell face down on the floor. Noel was calling the director, shaking her. Afterwards, the young man turned Yoon-ha onto her back. She was unconscious, and there was a red bruise on her forehead. Noel was finishing washing the floor. Everything was already sparkling clean after cleaning. At this time, Yoon-ha opened her eyes. The young man noticed this and leaned over her. Our heroine's gaze focused on the antique wall clock. She was horrified. She asked what had happened to their work. The director immediately jumped up, tearing off her blanket. The new employee reported that they had already finished cleaning. The girl asked what was glued to her forehead, and why she was sitting there. Noel was surprised that she didn't remember anything. She asked a clarifying question. The young man rubbed his neck. He answered abstractly. Yoon-ha found the situation strange. She didn't remember when she fainted. The girl remembered everything up until the moment Mr. Noel entered. After that, there was a gap in her memory. Our heroine never missed taking her medications, and there shouldn't have been any symptoms. But she still decided that it was worth seeing a doctor. There was a small wound on the finger of her right hand, but it still bothered her. Noel noticed it and decided to take a look. He took the director by the wrist. He asked not to touch the wound so that it wouldn't fester. Again, the memories haunted the girl. The situation became worse. Everything was bad. Yoon-ha felt like she had forgotten something that shouldn't be forgotten. At that time, Noel was carefully gluing the wound on her hand. The girl looked at her hand. She reproached herself for not being able to remember completely or forget completely. The young man began to worry about his colleague. He assumed that the director's head was overloaded with thoughts. Yoon-ha tried to joke neutrally. She replied that she was surprised, so she thought about it. The young man asked if this had happened to her because she had fainted. She confirmed it. She added that it was not only because of this. Everything was too complicated. Noel looked at her questioningly. The girl said that it might seem strange, but many things had happened in her life that she had forgotten. It ranged from those she met as a child to loved ones and treasured memories. People around her told Yoon-ha that she had erased the painful past she had to endure, that it was better for her to get rid of the difficult memories and feel relief. However, she was not sure. It seemed to the girl that with the erased memories her life had disappeared too, and she herself had disappeared. The young man wondered if she still thought the same. That even though Yoon-ha said so. But now she was diligently living her life. Noel noticed how the director had been diligently moving boxes since early morning, getting rid of stinking trash, wiping dirty floors. Every day she did again what others avoided. But still she said that she would disappear. The young man asked Yoon-ha why she chose this job. After all, he heard that she was a famous athlete before. She received medals and so on. Noel was sure she could find an easier job and wondered why she had decided to take up cleaning. Our heroine wondered, what was that? She asked herself what made her start cleaning. There was no significant reason that she could give to others. She said that she simply wanted to live. After all, she had something she had to protect. That's why she started, without a good reason or firm intention. Noel was stunned into silence by her words. Yoon-ha asked if it was hard to understand. She suggested that it would be easier to say that she loved it. The young man guessed that she was a better person than he had realized. The girl asked what that meant. Noel said he thought she looked like the adult he wanted to be like. Sanho lay curled up, telling himself that he wanted to be as big as Nuna. The girl chuckled. Noel asked what he said that was strange. Yoon-ha said that he spoke exactly like someone she knew. The young man asked again. The director said that this was the voice of a child who always wanted to look like an adult in her eyes. Soon, the 3-member cleaning crew was leaving the sparkling clean facility. Yoon-ha glanced over her shoulder one last time. Already leaving the gate, they encountered 2 children. A schoolgirl and a boy of about 5 were standing on the road. The cleaning team, all 3 of them, bowed their heads before them. They handed their business card to the girl. The children approached the house, and they watched the hired workers go. Yoon-ha asked the newbie how his work was today. She thought it was a tough task. She asked if the young man was okay. Noel liked it, contrary to expectations. Today he learned about the existence of such a job, and he was glad that he could learn a lot about the director. Soon Yoon-ha and Mr. Noel returned home. The girl was hungry, and she offered to cook dinner, offering to eat it together. The young man refused. Tired, he was going to go to bed, and they said goodbye until tomorrow. Noel opened the door to his bedroom. There were papers with writings on the board and photographs connected with threads. Then the phone rang. The young man immediately answered the incoming call. He touched the photo of Yoon-ha on the wall with his hand. He told the subscriber that he had succeeded in getting closer to the target. Talked to Mom, smiled serenely, looked with affection at the girl's photo. The woman asked if Noel had seen the documents she had sent. He replied that they were different from the information he had received. Mother thought the best thing was that he worked with a girl. She asked if Psyche had guessed. The young man said that the girl's name was Baek Yoon-ha. He was surprised that she didn't even know that. There was a document with a photo in front of him. The woman on the other end of the line was asking her son why he had been so rude today. She assumed it was because he had met her back in school. The young man remained silent. His mother assured him that the woman didn't remember anything anyway. He should have thought about how to use her. She ordered him not to make mistakes. Noel told his mother he was hanging up. He disconnected the call. He considered her advice useless nonsense. He began to think to himself in silence. After rubbing his forehead, the girl forgot everything. He wondered how he could use her. After all, she couldn't even tell him apart from a second-year student. And she constantly addressed him as a child. There was a whimper and a muffled cough. The man was lying tied up. His hands were pierced with a knife. Noel looked at the prisoner through the bars. Opening the door, he entered. The man began to whine even more. The gentleman pressed the knife with his foot, causing pain to the victim. Demanded silence. Said that the noise could disturb the person living on the floor below. At this time, Yoon-ha was climbing the stairs. She was yawning sweetly. She was looking forward to a night's rest. That night she dreamed of a public transport cabin and a cup of coffee, a quiet dream without emotions. In the morning, our heroine went down to the hall. Shin Noel had already gotten up. He was just drinking coffee. The young man wished him good morning. He noticed that Yoon-ha had gotten up later than usual today. She greeted him back. Said she had overslept today. Noel offered coffee. Said he had just had a glass himself. The girl said she wouldn't mind, but she was already late today. And if he had already finished, they could go together. Noel was in no hurry. He was finishing his invigorating drink. And he said that he had some business to attend to, so he was taking the day off. Yoon-ha was surprised when he had time. The young man replied that he had told Chief Kwan about this need at dawn. He asked for forgiveness for not informing him. Hyun-ha wished him luck in his business. She was about to leave. She was holding her sneakers in her hands to put them on before going outside. Noel was sure that it would take her a long time to get there on foot. He offered to give her a lift to the bus stop, but the girl refused. Hyun-ha reminded him that he had an important matter. That's why she didn't want to distract him. She said goodbye until the evening. He asked to wait a little. Noel handed her a thermos and a muffin. Knowing she wouldn't make it to breakfast, he prepared a snack in the office. He offered to pick her up from work in the evening. Hyun-ha was surprised. She thanked him briefly. The young man waved goodbye. They said goodbye until the evening. Our heroine was riding the bus. She felt strangely awkward. And it wasn't because this child was influencing her so much. It was because she hadn't grown up yet. On the office desk next to the keyboard and papers stood an empty mug and a container of dessert bases. 2 weeks have passed since our heroine began living with Mr. Noel. Time flew by faster than one could have imagined. Gradually, her desire to find out everything about the young man became weaker. Although her suspicions about him did not disappear, Hyun-ha couldn't understand why. While trying to find out more about Mr. Noel, while trying to remember something about Sang-ho, she seemed to hear a warning. She didn't understand why she felt unwilling to remember, and she wondered what made her feel stuck between two walls when she tried to remember. Don't do it! Don't remember, don't recognize, don't be interested. Gun, body, blood ringing in the ears, deafening scream, tears welling up. The director and the employee were having lunch. The colleague called out to the boss, asked if she had listened to her, asked her to repeat. Hyun-ha began to apologize. She assured Mrs. Woo-jin that she was lost in thought and did not hear. She seemed to be smoking with indignation. The girl repeated the phrase, that it seemed to her that her boss had changed a little lately. The red-haired colleague responded by saying that he hadn't noticed. The girl barked at him, said angrily that Mr. Do-yoon was completely clueless. She emphasized that their director had been thinking about something of her own lately, even when communicating with them. She suggested that something might have happened to their boss. Hyun-ha asked herself what she should do. After all, the people around her understood everything. She answered, smiling sweetly, which might have seemed to Woo-jin. The girl thought that they might not like it if she tried to bring back her memories, and they had to decide what to do with Mr. Noel before Uncle found out. She continued the conversation. She assured that Hyun-ha had been acting rather strangely. Now she was no longer sure of that. For now, she was closing the topic. Hyun-ha was thinking. She was going to go home today to watch her uncle to see if he had any idea about anything. Mr. Noel had to return from an important matter, so our heroine could go home. She was worried, and decided to bribe her uncle with his favorite food. In the evening, the director of the cleaning company said goodbye to her team. Then she went to the grocery store. She chose delicious food from the shelves. She remembered what her uncle liked most. Soon, Hyun-ha walked out of the market with a black shopping bag. An unknown person in a black cap spoke on the phone. The target's location has been confirmed. The young man asked the subscriber whether he should act now, but then someone quietly approached him from behind. The person in the blue shirt grabbed the guy in the cap and started to strangle him. The phone fell. There was a quiet struggle, but our heroine heard something. She looked over her shoulder warily in the direction of the sound. Hyun-ha looked at the empty street. She was surprised. She assumed that she might have imagined it. The unknown man's legs dragged limply into the gateway. The two were hidden from the girl's eyes. There was a bottle of vintage alcohol on the table, and next to it lay a dream-catcher amulet. The young man was sitting by the window. He had black gloves on his hands. He was holding a glass with a drink. He ordered to continue watching, pressed the earpiece of the wireless headset, ordered not to touch the girl. He said that he was receiving a guest, therefore he promised to call later, and nearby a brunette was sitting with his head down. The gentleman told the newcomer that everything was going as he wanted, and he suggested that he relax a little. He called the young man by the name Sang-ho. He was sitting on the sofa, and from under the collar of his black shirt there was a huge scar on his shoulder. Sang-ho leafed through the notes and put them on the table. His interlocutor quietly hummed an unknown melody, sipping amber alcohol from a glass. He asked the guest if this was the same girl that Sang-ho had protected 17 years ago and still does. He assumed that Sang-ho had set something up. The guest asked him not to worry. After all, there were people who needed to be touched, and there are those who need to be protected. He stayed close and protected the girl so that she would not die. The doors opened, ringing a loud bell. Our heroine informed her uncle of her visit. Yoon-ha took off her shoes in a hurry. On the way, she asked him if he had had dinner. She suggested that they have a tasty snack together. In anticipation of the meeting, the girl opened the doors. But what she saw horrified her. Her uncle was lying flat on the floor, motionless. Our heroine threw the bags of groceries at the threshold. She ran up to her uncle, worried. She started calling him loudly. The man's whole body was shaking, and he was trying to say something to Yoon-ha through clenched teeth. His niece asked him where it hurt. She didn't understand what could have happened. Vague fragments of phrases escaped the man's lips. Yoon-ha leaned closer to his face, trying to make out what he was saying. Lost again, a phrase formed from many attempts to say something to the girl. A dull sound was heard. The man reproached her that, apart from the fact that she needed time for herself, 4 years ago his niece came to his house. Uncle asked why she came with a questionable gift. Yoon-ha looked away in shame, sitting between the bags on the floor. A relative reproached her for giving her uncle, who was saddened by pain, a black eye. He asked if she would do him a favor now. The niece tried to laugh it off. Uncle put on his glasses and sat down on the sofa. And then he asked what happened to Yoon-ha. He assumed that the girl got married. The niece insisted that he was talking complete nonsense. The man reproached her for not coming for a long time and not telling her anything about herself. He sighed heavily. Yoon-ha showed off the branded bag from the store to her still offended uncle. She said that she bought him a gift and came to visit. The man beamed with joy and pressed the gift to his cheek. He said he held no grudges, and he was very happy to meet her. His niece accused him of lying. Uncle became sad, and changing his expression to a worried one, he asked what had happened to Yoon-ha, whether she had a boyfriend, whether she liked anyone. Yoon-ha was indignant about what Uncle Jae-kyung had told Uncle Jin-hyun about her recent acquaintances, and she didn't know if it was worth continuing this topic. The girl replied that it was something else, that there was something that should interest him. She asked if Uncle remembered the address of the first customer for cleaning. After all, Jin-hyun had personally met with the customer then. Uncle said it was a long time ago. The girl asked if the customer was a man or a woman. He recalled a gorgeous lady with purple hair. Our heroine concluded for herself that he did not know about Noel, and she thanked her uncle out loud for the story. After all, she understood that his reaction would have been different otherwise. The TV was broadcasting news. They were talking about an unknown company, Chonam, with new technology, about full-scale production and entering the market. Yoon-ha turned the volume down using the remote control. The announcer said on the screen that it was unexpected that the Chonam family was involved that day. Then one person came into the girl's field of vision on the screen. This caught her attention. It was said that the recovering Kim Ji-yeon also participated in the ceremony. Therefore, it became known about great hopes, innovations, and technologies in the future. Yoon-ha became interested in the woman in the frame and focused her attention on her as much as possible. The girl wondered if that person was from the San-ho family. She remembered the younger but similar face of the lady from before. Our heroine wondered who that woman was. But at that moment, a menacing voice was heard. A familiar voice whispered in her ear, "Close your eyes and ears, hold your breath. It will be better this way. The world will remain the same. You don't need to remember that." Yoon-ha felt like 2 eyes were looking at her from the darkness, and the voice spoke clearly and convincingly. "Now and after. Forget everything you heard." The doorbell rang. The door opened and active movement began. The guests came in. Seeing Yoon-ha, they began to ask what she was doing there, surprised by her visit. The children came in a noisy crowd. They exchanged greetings. They even found boxes of sweets and asked permission to help themselves to all the candies. Soon the kids were enjoying the sweets, and they were praising Aunt Yoon-ha. And Jin-hyun was indignant at the pranksters because they hadn't even had dinner yet. The sudden appearance of the guests surprised our heroine. For a second, she forgot herself. However, she still tried to remember what she had been thinking about recently. The guests began to persistently call back Yoon-ha to join their noisy company. The girl could not remember her thoughts a minute ago. She answered her relatives that she was already on her way to them. Yoon-ha told herself soothingly that if she forgot something, it wasn't that important. Uncle asked her to hurry up and eat with them. Soon 4 older relatives were sitting at the set table. Children were running around the house screaming. Adults were sharing news. After saying goodbye, Yoon-ho left, waving her hand goodbye. Her relatives were not ready to let her go, and each was sad in their own way. Our heroine hurried with long strides. In her hands, she carried a box, packages, and a bundle. A small bag hanging over her shoulder beat against her side in time with her steps. It was already dark. Yoon-ha was sitting at the bus stop. She had put her things next to her and was typing something on the touch keyboard of her smartphone. Suddenly, someone greeted the girl. She looked up and recognized the person she was talking to, and she asked if they had finished. The young man answered affirmatively. He added that it was all thanks to her. And then looking at the bags, he asked what kind of things the boss had. Eun-ha replied that they were things from her parents' house, and she grabbed the bags to carry. The brunette asked if it was hard for her. She laughed it off. Noel hurried to grab the handles of the bags, wanting to help the girl. He offered to go together. The boss asked if the young man was tired after work. Soon, Shin Noel was carrying heavy bags to the car. The girl was walking quickly behind him, and she suggested that they eat together the snacks she had bought. The young man smiled sweetly at Yoon-ha as he helped her pack her luggage into the car. Meanwhile, they were being followed. The man was sitting behind the wheel of a car that was parked nearby, his gloomy face armed with glasses, and next to him on the passenger seat, on a folder with documents, lay a smartphone and a photo of the object of surveillance. The phone screen lit up and almost immediately a ringtone sounded. The man looked back at the activated device. He adjusted the headset in his ear, listened to the tirade, clarified with the president that the conversation was about something else. Kim said she knew, and there was nothing she could do about it. She was going to send another child to find out. She asked to be more attentive, and without saying goodbye, she canceled the call on her mobile device with a button on the touchscreen. Afterwards, the lady called Yan Biso, simultaneously beckoning him with a hand gesture. The young man was ready to listen to the president. Mrs. Kim told him to prepare for the reception of guests. She promised to treat him to hot tea. She invited him to visit her in 2 hours. The woman sat at her desk sipping amber tea. She said she hadn't seen those children for so long, and she was looking forward to that meeting. It was a quiet alley at night. The bluish light of the moon illuminated the walls of the buildings. Everything around seemed cold and empty. A scarlet pool of blood slowly crawled towards the girl. Her legs froze in place. Crimson spots appeared on her white sneakers. Her face turned white, her eyes filled with mute horror. She stared without blinking, as if she had just seen something she refused to believe. In a narrow alley, bathed in deathly blue light, the boy stood in silence next to the body. A thick scarlet puddle flowed from under the man, spreading across the asphalt. In a narrow alley, bathed in deathly blue light, San-ho stood in silence next to the body. A thick scarlet puddle flowed from under the man, spreading across the asphalt. The boy's face was frozen in brown stains. His lips were trembling, but his voice was firm. He looked at Yoon-ha with wide eyes, full of pain and confusion, as if he was asking her one last time to believe him, or at least listen. The girl's hands and heart were shaking. The cold gripped her fingers and her chest was ringing with anxiety. It seemed that this could not be true. Although she was trembling, all tense with anxiety in her eyes, she made it clear that she knew everything from the very beginning. Behind the heroine, someone's footsteps quietly appeared. The stranger came close, remaining in the shadows. Sang-ho lowered his head, his voice trembling with pain. He spoke of saving her as a fault she shouldn't have to bear. She screamed in a trembling voice. The words came out of her mouth. Even if it happened again, even if she regretted it again, she would do the same. The boy looked at her with confusion, with a frozen expression on his face, as if he didn't know what to say and didn't fully understand what he was feeling. He squeezed out one word, looking at her with wide eyes, asking her to stop. His voice was shaking like him. A strange silhouette was looming behind her. A shadow loomed over her. Someone's axe was already raised to strike. Yoon-ha became wary, hearing a rustling sound behind her. She turned around and Sang-ho screamed in panic, asking her to turn around faster. Fear squeezed her throat. She couldn't move, as if her feet were rooted to the floor. Something heavy and sharp was rising from behind her. Her body did not obey. Her ears were ringing. Her heart was beating in her throat. The next moment, a blow fell upon her, and everything sank into darkness. As she fell, she seemed to fly into oblivion. The last thing she saw were the boy's frightened eyes, and a splash of blood in the air. The girl woke up lying on the floor next to the bed, with a disheveled blanket and things scattered around. Yoon-ha jerked back, crawling away from something in panic. An open laptop with a picture of a man lying on the floor nearby. She rose with difficulty, pressing her palm to her forehead. A small trickle of blood was running down her hand, and pain and the remnants of a nightmare were splashing in her eyes. There was a broken cup lying below. It was on this that the girl accidentally cut herself when she woke up on the floor. She squeezed her wounded hand, trying to ease the pain. Blood was dripping down her skin, and an alarming thought was spinning in her head. What kind of terrible dream was this? First, having brewed fresh tea, the young man began to prepare breakfast. Fortunately, modern kitchen appliances made all this much easier. Having settled comfortably at the table, the girl began to eat. There was a first aid kit lying on the table nearby. It had recently been used to bandage a cut on her hand. Our heroine was in a bad mood. She was overcome by apathy and fatigue. Noel put a cup next to her, warning that the drink was hot. Hyun-ha knew the truth, but she asked if anything would change. She frowned. The young man pushed back his chair and hurried to join her at the common table. Words of gratitude were heard for her care. So the girl found herself with Noel. It seemed she was beginning to remember San-ho. Such situations were not accidental when forgotten memories haunted them. But it was not clear when the question of Sano's death would be decided. Yoon-ha felt unwell somehow. She tried to convince herself that it was a pointless worry. They silently if. Soon Yoon-ha's plate was already empty. The young man was somehow slow in finishing his breakfast. Green peas and asparagus lay forlornly and uneaten on his plate. Noel put down his cutlery and rested his forehead on his fist. The girl saw a child in him, and assumed that he felt sick from the food. Suddenly the doorbell rang. Yoon-ha became wary. Were the owners expecting guests? Or who was announcing their visit? The young man was also surprised that guests had arrived. He asked his interlocutor if she had ordered anything. The girl reminded that she had been a guest here herself. She didn't even know the exact address. Noel reported that he always planned invitations in advance. Yoon-ha stomped towards the door. The young man asked if she was going to leave. She confirmed, adding that she would go for a short while. The doorbell rang again. Our heroine took hold of the door handle. By pressing it, she opened the entrance lock. There was a guy standing outside in the rain. He wasn't hiding from the streams of water from the sky. On the contrary, he was catching them in his open palm. The girl looked at the unexpected guest in bewilderment. For a mature man, he looked rather unusual. The stranger's hands were covered in black gloves. Smiling, he adjusted his luxurious hair. Hyun-ha suddenly remembered the three masked men. Her breathing became labored and her heart skipped a beat. Suddenly, the girl began to fall on her back. The guest ran as fast as he could towards her. A few seconds later, the guy sat down next to Yoon-ha. She was completely out of it. Noel checked the girl's breathing, putting his fingers to her nose. He glared angrily and asked the uninvited guest why he had come. He reminded him that he couldn't come in the middle of a mission, and he asked if he really wanted to ruin everything. The uninvited guest took the girl's hand and brought it to his lips for a kiss. At the same time, he looked at Noel defiantly. The young man said that he had come from their beloved brother, who had not answered the phone. He assumed that he was in a bad mood. He asked how he could convey an urgent message, and so he had no choice but to pay a visit in person. The brown-haired man told Noel defiantly that this fallen girl was his concern. He stated that she used to be quite capricious. If you remember, you were warned, and if not, you would faint. Shaitan said that no matter how you look at it, Noel chose the easy way out. And now he looked like he was about to run away offended. He asked if this meeting was a burden to him. He asked me not to run away. He said that my younger brother would tell me a story worth dying for. He assured me that Madame was looking for a girl, and he put the gun on the porch under my feet. And he set a time for tomorrow evening at the R Hotel, on the 45th floor. Looking predatorily into his eyes, he told his brother that it was necessary to take the rum from the Indians. The events take us to Hong Kong 17 years ago. It happened at a police station. The girl was holding onto the bars and trying to attract attention. Hyun-ha tried to remember how to say policeman in English. Seeing a man in uniform, the girl called for help. He hurried away, and in dialect he said as he left that it was too noisy. He told me to shut my mouth and sit quietly. Our heroine lived righteously for 20 years. Tears streamed down her face. She began to bite her lip. In a distant foreign country, she couldn't explain that she wasn't the kidnapper. A small misunderstanding turned into a crime. Hyun-ha sat on the floor of the pretrial detention cell. A boy sat on her lap. She entertained the child as best she could. Our heroine, even having changed her appearance, could not avoid being detained by the police. However, when she didn't take San-ho out of the house, so many things happened. But the girl didn't regret it. And now, while being detained at the police station, The boy fell asleep sitting pressed against her chest. Yun-ha started to cry. The baby was so alone, and there was nothing she could do about it. Tears rolled down her cheeks. The girl noticed that her dirty hands were shaking. She was so confused, and she had no answers to anything. Our heroine looked towards the guards and asked herself what she had to do to get them out of here. Yun-ha considered running away and leaving the country illegally, but eventually gave up, finding the plan strange. Soon a man in uniform brought out and led Sanho with him. He was given into the care of the government. They understood that they would be caught and put in prison for a long time until old age. And although the girl refused to become a criminal, she could not think of anything else. I asked myself if they stopped paying the criminal a pension. Everything was complicated. Then the cell doors opened. They ordered to leave. Yun-ha, not believing her ears, asked again. The policeman asked to hurry up and leave the cell. The girl stood up with the sleeping Sanho in her arms. As she passed by, she glanced sideways at the man in the uniform of a law enforcement officer. Here her gaze met the young man. The brown-haired man was sitting and smiling broadly at her, waving his hand in greeting. The guy was glad he found her. He said the hide-and-seek ended in a different place than he thought. Yun-ha was surprised. She wondered why this man was here, and she hugged the child even tighter. Meanwhile, the brown-haired man mocked predatorily. He asked if the girl was very scared, and as if asking himself who he should have caught first. It was already late. The stars were shining from the sky to the earth. The windows of the houses were glowing with a soft light. Yun-ha wondered what she should do now. Her body was shaking. The girl assumed that she was sent to the police station as a criminal, and this man simply pulled them out. And she asked herself if he was a murderer of people. Looking up, she assumed that this was a real villain. It was strange that he helped so suddenly. Only the motive was unknown yet. But the strangest and most incomprehensible thing to our heroine was Sanho's behavior. She wondered why, being next to the killer of her parents, the boy was so unperturbed. It seemed like he was waiting to be found, as if he was stuck and showed no reaction. Many questions arose. The girl began to bite her lips. She felt unprotected. Her hands, clenched into fists, were shaking. Sanho called out to his friend. Yun-ha couldn't imagine what the boy could be hiding, but she wanted to hear everything from him personally. She assumed that it would be faster that way. The girl touched Sanho's cheek. He squinted one eye and looked at his friend. It seemed that he was not going to tell anything himself today. She stroked the boy's head, and she thought that no matter how difficult it was, she could wait a little, until the child began to trust her and tell her the whole truth. Yun-ha supposed that it would be possible to understand him. After all, he had no choice but to take revenge. She began to stretch the boy's cheeks, suggesting that he smile. Sanho began to protest against being treated like that, and he began to mumble something, and the girl continued to think to herself. Looking at the brunette, she was surprised that she was still kneeling and he was talking on the phone. She was indignant that the criminal was sitting on a soft, and decent people were on the cold floor. He didn't even pay attention to them. She thought that she could take a gun and run away. The brown-haired man spoke to his interlocutor in German. He reported that he had found Eros, and he was in Psyche's arms. He suggested finishing for today. He promised to call later to provide more information. Pausing, the boy told Baek Yun-ha not to look at him so ominously. He cocked the pistol with his hand. He clicked the bolt. Pointing the blue on the girl, the criminal assumed that she did not understand the whole situation. He asked how she was in her head. He asked not to complicate things. He put the gun to Yun-ha's forehead. Our heroine was shaking with fear, and she said that she had done nothing of the sort. It all seemed rather strange. The girl simply studied and entered Hanul University, and perhaps she was the smartest one there. The young man said that he had thought about her since their first meeting. He assumed that she was different from others in her courage, and it would be interesting to teach her. His finger was on the trigger. It seemed like the bullet was about to hit Yun-ha's head. But then something happened so quickly that our heroine didn't quite understand. It turned out that Sanho knocked the gun out of the guy's hands. The child immediately grabbed the gun, taking control of the entire situation. He immediately took out the magazine, deftly pressing the mechanism. Sanho held the magazine in his hands. He spoke in German. He said that he thought so, that the gun was unloaded. He advised not to play like that if he did not intend to use it. Shaitan assumed that Sanho liked this girl. He reminded him of the time when he took care of him, and asked if he was jealous of her now. Our heroine began to get angry. She did not speak German. The girl was infuriated that she did not understand anything about what these two were talking about. The boy placed his trembling hand on Yoonha's wrist. She promised herself to wait until Sang-ho decided to trust and open his heart to her. As a result, Johan led them out of the police station. And now they were sitting in the back seat of his car. Sang-ho whispered in his ear that the guy would not hurt them. The boy asked Yoonha not to worry. She asked how the child could know for sure. Sang-ho said that this guy was his guardian. That's why he had to know such things. He assured her that everything wasn't so bad so far, and he promised to protect her. Our heroine ordered herself to calm down and soberly assess the situation. The child was an opponent. She decided not to give in to emotions and make hasty decisions. She ordered herself to think calmly, as if it were a competition. Sang-ho was all emotional. Our heroine had never seen him like this before. In order to calm and encourage the boy, Yoonha put her hand on his, and she thought that instead of judging herself, it would be better to trust the child. However, the girl did not know the whole situation, and she hoped to learn at least something from Sang-ho himself. She sternly told the guy not to manipulate the child, but to get down to business. The heroine's eyes sparkled with determination. She declared that the boy was incapable of negotiating, and she took it upon herself to do it in his place. Yoonha saved this child, and now she couldn't lose him again. She asked why the guy brought them here, and even if he wanted to use it, the girl demanded to know what the goal was. She preferred to be locked up again, instead of being threatened. The guy was silent. He watched Yoonha and the boy for a while. Then he said that she was making fun of the child, and he wanted to have a corner for Faith. The young man thought it would be better to follow in the footsteps of the fearless. He took something out of his back pocket. Then he threw the object at the girl's feet. He asked if he should trust her in exchange for taking care of the boy who was needed to implement his plan. The guy said that he was the boss here, and if the girl remembers this, then her conditions will be accepted. He said that it would depend on how she behaved. Their communication could change. And he extended his hand, smiling, offering cooperation. Eunha decided to take the initiative into her own hands. She asked how she could trust him. It seemed that she had forgotten the most important thing. She had little information, so it was difficult to gain an advantage. She wanted to dig further slowly, so that there would be a chance to find out everything. She said that there was a criminal in front of her who was going to use Sang-ho. She demanded to be convinced that he would keep his promise. He said that there was something the girl really wanted. Yoonha wanted guarantees of their safety. By doing this, she allowed herself to be used. The guy agreed, and smiling contentedly, he asked if there were any other wishes. She demanded less than he expected from her. He asked if the girl knew his name. The answer was negative. He was interested in what she knew about this situation and where they were. He asked her to guess. Yoonha looked at the boy who looked at her. She didn't know what to say about this atmosphere. There was silence. The guy grabbed Sang-ho by the collar. He told him to stop. Sang-ho hung limply, face down, held by his clothes. Soon the boy was lying motionless on the soft bed, face down. Yoonha was indignantly screaming at the boy for what he had done to the child. The interlocutor was surprised that the girl saw a child in him. He expected words of gratitude from her. After all, now they could calmly have a heart-to-heart talk. Yoonha was outraged by the violence against the child. The guy retorted that it was time for the children to go to bed. He asked if she was worried for the child that he had not slept for so long. After all, one could even die from that. And pressing back, Yoonha asked to say that she did not know. The guy squeezed her cheeks. In this position, she said that a killer was chasing Sang-ho, that his parents were dead, that he had a house in Hong Kong to go back to. Somehow, having wriggled out, the girl declared that she had said more than she wanted, despite the fact that she knew nothing for sure. The guy said that although the boy looked simple, he was actually quite a promising person. Chanam Company supplied weapons all over the world. The family of co-owners was quite large, but Sang-ho was the only grandson. The company had plans for tens of millions of won to own new technologies of the future. The boy hugged Yoonha by the shoulder. He quietly whispered into the girl's ear that this child had all the information about this, and he nodded towards the sleeping boy. He claimed that everyone who was familiar with the industry was eager to get their hands on this child. There were many competitors who wanted to grab him. Yoonha thought it was strange that a man who had a gun didn't know about the Chanam Company. The girl asked if this was why Sang-ho was captured, and also if this was classified information. After all, the company was monitoring security. The guy assured that he had teamed up with him and told the competitors everything. He seemed pleased with himself and his actions. And although there was some benefit, now because of this secret, Yoon-ha and the boy were hanging by a thread. Taking the girl by the chin, he repented that he had not told her everything from the very beginning. After all, he was San-ho's uncle and guardian all in one. He asked to call him Judas. In real time, our heroine leaned her head on the guy's shoulder and came to her senses. She opened her eyes and focused on the space around her. Turning her head, the girl saw a brown-eyed man smiling broadly at her. The guy gently touched her face. He greeted Baek Yoon-ha and said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. It was evening outside. The sky had turned bright orange and the sun had almost set. Everyone was busy working at the cleaning company. Some were checking documents, some were talking on the phone, and others were sitting at their computers. Yoon-ha glanced at the screen and squeezed her fingers tighter. It was already 5:15. The time had come. Our heroine was in a hurry. In one hand she had a bag, in the other, a blue folder which she carefully placed inside. The girl said goodbye to her colleagues, saying that she had a lot to do. She smiled and advised them not to stay up late. Everyone responded with smiles, saying that they had done a great job. Only Guo-nu silently watched from the side, not saying a word. Do-yoon suddenly walked up to him and leaned over to whisper if he had noticed anything strange between Noel and their boss. Go-nu looked at him in surprise, not understanding what he was talking about. The redhead continued, saying that something had clearly happened between them. They barely communicated. The guy didn't even know what to answer. He just turned back slightly and muttered that he himself hadn't noticed anything strange. Go-nu looked at Noel, who was calmly busy with his work, and shrugged. The redhead frowned, still feeling that the situation was somehow strange. The city was drowning in the sunset, slowly transitioning to the evening bustle. High-rise buildings cast long shadows, and buses and cars stretched along the road. Yoon-ha hurried along, clutching her bag tightly, the wind ruffling her hair as the sky behind her glowed a warm orange. Suddenly a man's voice was heard from behind. The girl stopped and turned around sharply, trying to see who had called her. It was Noel's uncle. He sat with his head slightly bowed with a slight, almost playful smile. He was wearing a blue shirt with the collar unbuttoned. The look was completed with black trousers, leather gloves, and an expensive watch that glittered on her wrist in the evening light. Yuna came closer. She felt awkward about being late because the elders should come first, and she immediately apologized. The man smiled softly. He wasn't angry. He just said that he had arrived a little early and it wasn't a problem. Noel's uncle took her hand gently. Their separation had been a mistake, and now that they were together again, he didn't want to lose her again. He touched her fingers gently, as if he was hesitating to squeeze her palm tighter. The movement was soft, almost timid, full of caution. A moment later, his fingers closed over her hand. A warm grip, like a reminder that he was close and didn't want to let go. The man jerked Yoon-ha towards him. Her body leaned forward. Her bag slipped off her shoulder and her lips parted in surprise. The girl involuntarily buried her face in his hair and, confused, froze for a second. He carefully took both of her hands, looking up with a slight smile. His voice was quiet but confident, offering to start over. After these words, silence hung between them. She did not know what to say, and the man simply waited, not letting go of her hands. It had been 4 days since she had first met Noel. She was sitting next to him on the couch, her head resting on the stranger's shoulder, still unconscious. Waking up, she slowly raised her head and looked at the man next to her in surprise. His face seemed so familiar, but she couldn't remember who he was. The stranger leaned slightly closer, looking into her eyes. His voice was calm, his movements were soft. He ran his hand over her cheek as if calming her. Yoon-ha pulled away, embarrassedly leaning against his chest. The man sadly reminded her that there was a special relationship between them that she had forgotten about. The girl sharply pushed him away with her palm in the chest, not understanding what he was talking about. She jumped up from the sofa, noticing a familiar dream catcher on the table. Exactly the same one Yoon-ha had once given to the boy she had saved. The girl stared at the man in shock, her eyes wide open. Her heart began to beat faster and questions were spinning in her head. How did this happen? And who was he really? The stranger didn't answer, only smiled softly in response to her question. There was calm in his gaze, as if he knew more than he wanted to say. The main character froze, looking at the man in shock. Her face turned pale and her body trembled. She remembered nothing again. Another memory lapse. Hyunha clenched her fist tightly, looking down. It was too hard to say anything, as her insides were clenched with confusion and fear. Each time the girl became a hostage of her own memory, something important slipped away, leaving anxiety behind. Her head was completely empty. To break out of the vicious circle of repeating events, she needed to regain the lost memories hidden somewhere deep inside. The main character winced from the inner pain. Somewhere inside there was still a part that didn't want to remember, wanting to just hide and forget. She looked down and quietly said that she didn't remember anything. Since the accident, she has problems with her memory, and sometimes even simple things are difficult. Hyunha stood there, not turning around, as if she was talking to nothing. Questions were spinning in her head. How did he end up in her house, and why was she even talking to him? The man grinned and calmly added that he had come for a reason. He had some business here. The stranger reminded her that she had lost consciousness immediately after seeing him. His voice was calm, but with a slight hint of reproach. He added that in such a situation he simply had no choice. He could not leave her alone without knowing what condition she was in. Then the man realized that he had to put her down and wait for Yoon-ha to wake up. He carefully picked her up, carried her home, and laid her down gently on the sofa. From then on, he simply stayed close, waiting for her to wake up. The heroine was embarrassed and confused. Her cheeks flushed, her gaze was lowered, her lips were trembling. It was difficult for her to find words in this awkward situation. The man gently took her chin and leaned closer, looking into her eyes. His voice was calm. He asked if she remembered anything. The girl suddenly remembered. Before meeting this man, she had definitely seen Noel. Everything was confused in her head, and now she wasn't sure. What if she had just imagined it? She put her hand to her forehead sharply in complete shock. Her eyes were filled with fear and confusion, and her voice trembled as she tried to ask his name. The man smiled faintly, lifting the corners of his lips. His light, almost mocking smile contained a hidden threat and an uneasy calm. He tilted his head slightly and without taking his eyes off her said his name. Lee Sang-ho. The man leaned in so close to her that their faces almost touched, his voice soft and relieved. He had been looking for her for too long. The main character's eyes were wide open in fear. Her gaze was frozen, as if the whole world had frozen around her. She was in complete horror and confusion. The girl pushed his hand away sharply, no longer able to bear the closeness or the touch. Everything inside her was clenched with incomprehension. She recoiled, unable to contain her emotions, and screamed, accusing him. The words came out with pain. He was calling himself by the name of a dead man, playing with her feelings. Her voice trembled. Everything inside her was clenching. The girl remembered. San-ho died in an accident. Her memory was failing, confusing. But she knew one thing for sure. That man was dead. And this one in front of her was not like him at all. The man remained calm, saying that somewhere deep inside she knew the truth, even if she didn't want to admit it. He recalled that 17 years ago he miraculously survived an attack and accident, and she saved him by bringing him home. Ayunha's face turned chalky white. After hearing this, she froze as if the ground had slipped out from under her feet. It seemed that in another second the girl would lose consciousness again. A terrible memory came to mind. Little San-ho kneeling down right in front of the truck to pick up the dream catcher she had once given him. Hyun-ha rushed forward in a panic and at the last moment grabbed the boy by the hood of his sweatshirt, yanking him back sharply away from the headlights. At the very last second, she succeeded. Everything worked out. They were both safe, as was the precious dream catcher. The girl was breathing heavily from the horror she had experienced, hugging the boy to herself. There was only one thought pounding in her head. They had survived. The boy looked scared and a little confused. He was still coming to his senses, but still quietly said that he was okay. A crowd quickly gathered around them, with passers-by exchanging excited glances as they watched the girl hugging the boy on the roadway. Yoon-ha staggered back, her legs buckling from the strain, her entire body shaking from the memories and shock that washed over her. She kept repeating the same thing over and over again, unable to calm down, still trying to understand what was happening. The man carefully took her chin in his gloved hand and gently lifted her head, forcing her to look at him. He looked closely into her eyes, still holding her chin, and asked a quiet but tense question. Did she remember now? The girl turned pale. Fear was frozen in her eyes. Beads of sweat were running down her face. Her breathing was ragged, and her gaze was darting about, unable to accept reality. Eun-ha couldn't understand what exactly had happened. Anxiety was brewing inside her. It seemed like Sang-ho had been hiding something from her all this time. The people who haunted him and his strange family, all of this haunted him. Even though his memory failed him, fragments and vague images would occasionally surface. Suddenly, Eun-ha screamed. She clenched her fist and said with horror on her face that she couldn't believe that he was really Sang-ho. The man froze. His face became serious. Disappointment flashed in his eyes. It was obvious that her words had deeply affected him. A cold glint appeared in the stranger's gaze. He narrowed his eyes and, as if challenging, offered to play a game. The man stepped closer and their legs almost touched. The atmosphere between them became tense. He ran his hand down her cheek and then wrapped his arms around her waist, bringing her closer. She didn't like it. Everything in her body tensed up and she froze. Eun-ha pursed her lips and said that she was not in the mood for his weird jokes right now. Her voice was shaking, but her gaze remained firm. The man continued calmly. Even if his words seemed stupid now, one day they would help her regain her lost memories. He traced his finger over her lips, looking straight into her eyes. He said that memory might have erased a lot, but there were still answers inside that needed to be found. The interlocutor stated that he knew everything. Eun-ha bit his fingers sharply, unable to withstand the pressure. The brown-haired man introduced himself as Sang-ho, and assured that he had been looking for his Nuna for a long time. He said that he knew everything that could interest her. He asked what the girl wanted to do. He asked her to believe him and offered to help her remember everything. And if she didn't want to, he offered to forget about it forever. The young man insisted that the choice was on Eun-ha, and he was ready to help no matter what she chose. After all, he did not want to break the promise they had made to each other. Our heroine indignantly pushed him away from her. She demanded that he stop spouting all sorts of nonsense. The young man smiled contentedly, narrowing his eyes. The familiar feeling of déjà vu arose. Eun-ha thought that this man certainly knew everything that she had forgotten. And even if he wasn't really Sang-ho, it felt like I knew him before I lost my memory. Our heroine wondered if it would do her any good. She still wanted to know the truth that was hidden from her. It was obvious that it was necessary. Eun-ha narrowed her eyes angrily and asked the guy if he was having fun with the whole situation. He assured her that he had pure intentions and didn't even think of joking. And he asked her to accept his words, even if they seemed suspicious. He took the girl by the hand, and with the other he put his arm around her waist, pressing her to himself. He wanted to be useful. Our heroine thought that perhaps this man would not interfere with finding answers, and might even help. So from that day on, the girl decided to accept the help of the one who called himself Sang-ho. The events of that incident could be divided into two parts. Eun-ha remembered a small part after meeting Noel and was able to prepare herself to match the incident. The personality of Sang-ho had a more dangerous past than our heroine remembered. He was the heir to a huge fortune, becoming a sweet prey. And something else important happened. The boy's death in that accident was faked. Our heroine summed up that Sang-ho's death was not in her memories. She asked if it was a fake. The young man confirmed it. Eun-ha asked why then. Even after hearing the explanation, it all seemed strange to her. The brown-haired man smiled mysteriously at her in response. He placed his hand on the girl's clenched fist. She believed that there was no need to pretend to be dead after receiving a huge inheritance. And she stated that in order to avoid people hunting him, it was not worth arranging that accident at all. Eun-ha tried to understand that if it was all a setup, then what was the point of getting seriously injured? However, Sang-ho's answer was rather strange. He said that although the woman he was talking to didn't believe him, everything he said was absolutely true. After all, the girl knew everything before the accident. It made her furious. Eun-ha said that if the boy died, all the property would go to the Jeonnams. And they clearly did not want that outcome. After all, there was no benefit in it. What struck our heroine most was why she so easily believed in Sang-ho's death 17 years ago. It turned out that what the girl saw in the wooden box when she came on crutches to say goodbye to her deceased friend was not Sang-ho's body at all. And when Eun-ha came face to face with Noel, she felt awkward. Maybe she subconsciously remembered something from the time they were together. It was as if he had opened Pandora's box. His words were different from the memories that our heroine had when she saw Sang-ho. For some reason, Eun-ha was worried. She thought that everything she remembered and what she heard from the guy matched. But there was a feeling that something was slipping away from her. Although the story seemed flawless, there was a hidden part. Yoon-ha asked why the boy's family didn't care that he died. The answer followed that it was actually because of her. The girl indignantly asked again, switching to a shout. The interlocutor was quietly humming something to himself, and then he asked if Yoon-ha remembered how when he was little, she signed a contract. That's where all the problems came from. The interlocutor, trembling, asked when this had happened. The brown-haired man answered that it had happened a long time ago when he was still little, and he was surprised that the girl did not remember it at all. Here our heroine remembered how the boy woke her up and sleepily asked her to sign something. Now she realized that it was a contract. The answer was affirmative. The guy said that he was waiting for Nuna's approval so he could use the inheritance. And she grabbed her head. The interlocutor said that he was useless on his own. Maybe he was allowed to die because it would have been better that way. And with a mysterious smile, he touched the girl's hand. He said that in order to save himself, he invented death for himself. His fingers in a black glove intertwined with our heroine's fingers. Hyun-ha bit her lip, and with an effort she broke the forced physical contact. The guy said that a lot of time had passed, but everything was still the same. Everything was still interesting. And he asked Nuna about her recent memories. The bloody scenes that appeared before Yoon-ha's eyes gave her a headache. The girl winced and tried to push that feeling away. Stroking her cheek, the guy noticed that it was already late for a date. He suggested leaving it at that until next time. The guy helped Yoon-ha get up. He showed concern and attention for her. He started fussing, but our heroine, citing the heat, assured that everything was fine. He touched the girl's forehead, checking her health. This was captured on camera. Soon this photo was sent in a messenger by phone, and also a note that there was some kind of connection between these two. The guy was asking to go on a real date. Yoon-ha asked to let go of her waist. The guy joked that it was called support. It was 10 o'clock in the evening. The windows of the entertainment establishments were lit up, welcoming guests to have a good time. The two were sitting opposite each other by the window. The waiter had already set the table with the ordered dishes for dinner. The guy was skillfully handling the cutlery, and then he also cut on the girl's plate. Yoon-ha was surprised where he learned to do it so well. She noticed that he had grown a lot and improved his skills. The interlocutor modestly lowered his eyes and laughed in response. He assured that he had learned a lot since then. Our heroine asked what exactly. The guy asked if she was interested, and then he made a cheeky smile. Yoon-ha thought it was strange that she was curious a minute ago, but as soon as he asked, her interest immediately disappeared. She asked if he found it curious. The interlocutor expressed regret. After all, he had done so much since growing up, and I would like to share this in more detail. The girl asked to give an example. The guy grinned slyly and said, "This is it," while simultaneously placing his foot next to the girl's foot under the table. Yoon-ha couldn't stand it and kicked him, and she asked herself since when did he start behaving like that? It seemed like he was a completely different person. The girl looked at him angrily from under her forehead. She demanded that he stop playing and eat in peace. He only joked in response and laughed, pretending to be submissive. The brown-haired man became to pick out pieces from the plate in order to try the tastiest of them. Yoon-ha noticed to herself that it was quite tasty, and decided to see the staff later. The guy cut a steak on a plate and sent it into his interlocutor's mouth. She chewed with her mouth full. Shaitan asked Nunu why she was looking for forgotten memories, and whether the girl thought that she would get better than now. The answer was negative. The interlocutor then asked why she needed it. Hyuna said that she should have known at least a little bit. She pricked a piece of meat and brought it to the guy's mouth. The girl couldn't understand why people around her hid the truth when someone showed interest in him. And the thought of remembering the past was not so good. However, she thought it was wrong to know nothing about her past. Yoon-ha wondered what the boy had said to her last. In her memory, the child was covered in blood and tears. The girl put down her fork, having finished her meal, and asked with emphasis what San-ho had told her then. The guy remained silent with a sad face. Soon the restaurant's floor manager was ushering customers in, inviting them to come back, in keeping with company standards. Having opened the doors to the street, our heroine froze in place while her escort said farewell formal words to the employee of the establishment. There was a jewelry stand outside in the open air. A guy in a mask was hanging out nearby and taking pictures of something on his phone. Hyun-ha walked up to the counter and was amazed when she saw a familiar item. It was a pendant in the shape of two intertwined hearts with a stone in the middle. She remembered the boy handing her a yellow box. San-ho said that he wanted to give her a gift in return. When Yoon-ha opened it and looked at it in surprise, The child said that this necklace would help her get rid of nightmares. The boy said that it was something he wanted to give. It had the same meaning, but he wanted to give it to the girl when she grows up. That's why he asked her to take care of herself until that day. Our heroine looked sadly at the pendant. She carefully held it in her slightly bent ladle-shaped hand as if it were some rare jewel. The guy put his arm around her. He asked if it was like what Nuna had done long ago. The answer was yes. Eun-ha said that it reminded him of the past. Then she asked if the young man remembered how he gave the necklace on the day of his departure. The brunette put his arm around the girl's shoulders. She looked up at him from her height. She called out his name. At that moment they were in the photographer's frame again. The guy rubbed his beard thoughtfully. I asked if this was what he had bought and given to Nuna, and then he suggested buying more of the same. He offered to take the whole set, a ring and a necklace. Eun-ha asked why he was so close to her. The girl asked him to move away and talk. She was sure that people could misunderstand them. The interlocutor was stubborn, saying that he liked it that way. The young man intertwined his fingers with hers. Bowing his head, he told Nuna that people seemed to be approaching, and asked her to think about how she could get home safely. Our heroine wondered if it was surveillance, and she also couldn't understand whether those people were watching San-ho or her. She was still scared. Hyuna said that she was innocent. The young man hugged her and said that it was dangerous for her to go home now. The guy, without letting her go, suggested that they just relax together. The girl said that she didn't know what kind of reaction she should show. A request came in to cuddle up to him a little, and the guy himself quietly pulled the chain of that decoration. Eun-ha suggested going to the hotel. The young man asked her again with a surprised face. The girl repeated, confirming. And a moment later she suggested to her that it could also be suitable. She asked what they would do. Shin Noel wandered around the room with a glass of wine in his hand. In order to while away the time, he looked at the pictures on the wall. The special one in glasses was the executive secretary, Jan Guanshin. He reported that Germany and Poland had signed an agreement, and I assumed that local businesses had a good reaction. But the US side was waiting. It seemed that public opinion there was not so good. Kim Ji-yeon was interested in the reason. She was the director of the Jeonnam Group. The assistant linked it to the accident that happened to the boss's daughter 5 years ago. There were bad rumors about Jeonnam. The sales evaluations were also negative. Vice President Shin Ae-seb and the eldest son rubbed his beard in thought. He asked what their media group was doing. After all, he remembered that they had been given a huge sum of bribe. Secretary Yang assumed that these rumors came from the parliament. He believed that the media could not act recklessly. The mother wanted to hear Ihan's opinion on the matter. The assistant reported that the executive director preferred to wait and see. John said that it was not the reduction in the frequency of purchases that was important. Public opinion was against special products, and the director told them not to rush into decisions. Kim looked through the documents. The secretary commented that sales were stopped and the remainder was sold to the mafia. But all this was rumor. There was no physical evidence, and it was necessary to convince public opinion before going to court. Kim ordered the secretary to pass this on to the fourth. Shin Ye-seb asked the president if she was being too trusting. After all, the person in question didn't even show up to the meeting. He was offended that he himself was ignored as the younger son. He thought that the impudent fellow was too carried away with that lady. Shin Noel insisted that it wasn't worth listening to, and that he himself went there because of a mission. The guy was the junior of the Jeonnam Group. Ye-seb asked if this was the same person he and Ihan had chased in childhood. They had parties and made a lot of noise around her. The mother ordered the boys to stop in a stern tone. Baek Eun-ha went to the fourth, and the youngest had his own business. Kim took a cup of tea. Changing the subject, she said that the tea smelled so nice today. Noel shuffled his feet, intending to leave the room. His mother, without looking up at him, said that she would be waiting for him with good news. She called her son by name. He looked over his shoulder and smiled, saying he understood. The brown-haired man walked down the street. Eun-ha touched his cheek with her hand. The guy said that he should prepare so as not to let her down. The night sky enveloped the city, and the moonlight reflected in the windows of a tall building. Everything around seemed quiet and alarmingly calm. A dim reflection of the moon glided across the glass. It seemed as if the building itself breathed the cold of the night, hiding within itself what was not meant to be found. Bodies lay. Blood dripped from the sheets, staining them crimson. In silence, a man watched the dead. Cleaners worked, as if this scene was a normal routine for them. The phone rang. A hand stained with blood reached for the screen. The face did not twitch, only the gaze became a little more focused. Noel glanced briefly at the name flashing on the screen and immediately responded, his voice calm despite the complete darkness surrounding him. After the conversation, the man turned off the phone and turned to the assistant. A slight, almost indifferent smile appeared on his face. A man with red hair came out of the darkness. He walked confidently, telling others what to do. The cleaning went quickly without words or fuss. The cleanup had to go perfectly. The man knew that if the police found out, he would be in trouble. And his mother did not forgive mistakes. Miller nodded and asked a clarifying question. At that moment, the signal sounded again. A new message. The man's gaze instantly changed. He took out his phone with a bloody hand, and the words Shin Yo-han brought Baek Yoon-ha to his place flashed on the screen. His heart sank with tension. Something inside him suddenly squeezed. He ran his hand through his hair as if trying to drive away the growing irritation. His thoughts were confused. The phone disappeared into his pocket, but the aftertaste remained. Anger began to rise from within, and it became increasingly difficult to contain it. The reflection in the window showed a cold, handsome figure. White shirt, dark trousers. Noel stood alone, his eyes closed. Pieces of the past flashed through his mind. The answer he was looking for was still missing. Noel's brother proposed a deal. Instead of searching for the truth, play at love. He asked Yoon-ha to pretend to be his girlfriend in front of everyone. Noel himself heard their conversation from behind the door. He tensed up when the girl clarified the purpose of all this, and the man answered her vaguely and ambiguously. Suddenly, Shin Yo-han pulled her close and bit her ear. She flinched and cursed, not understanding what was happening. On the stairs, breathing heavily, the girl went up to her room. Slamming the door, she cursed loudly, throwing out her irritation. He stayed outside and laughed quietly. He thought it was funny. It was obvious that the man was enjoying her reaction. Noel came closer, hearing everything. However, the man did not like it. He intervened, blocking the way. The conversation between them became tense. Noel ordered him not to interfere. The man put his hand on his shoulder and whispered something provocative. The older brother continued to taunt, comparing Noel's indecisiveness to his own. He offered to help, ironically with a slight grin. Noel frowned and pushed him away. The hand on his shoulder disappeared, but the aftertaste remained. Anger was growing in his chest. His brother's words sounded mocking. He only smiled, seeing Noel's fists clench. The tone of the conversation became more and more dangerous. The final warning was harsh. The past had surfaced. The day everything had changed. He wasn't going to let that happen again. The veins on his neck and face began to bulge. Everything inside him was boiling. He barely contained his rage, not wanting to give free rein to his emotions. The thought flashed through his mind that this time it would be different. He was no longer going to remain silent or give in. It was time to act. Having finished on the spot, he left. People were cleaning up the evidence, and Muller turned around in surprise, noticing his departure. They tried to stop him, called him by name, but he didn't stop. He walked confidently with his jacket in his hand, hiding the other in his pocket. The moon hung in the sky, reflected in the windows of a tall building. Night again. Someone's footsteps again, soft, almost inaudible. Ona wandered around the apartment, looking at everything carefully. A new place, a strange house, a strange atmosphere. Shin Yo-han stood at the table, casually leaning his elbows, and offered a drink. Everything looked too cozy and at the same time alarming. She was tired of coffee. He replied that there was nothing but coffee. The house was shared between two people and someone drank it all. Then Yoon-ha said that she would just drink water. The girl wondered if he was talking about her brother. But she decided not to go into details, took the water and took a sip, holding the mug with both hands. They sat next to each other. The man asked a strange question. Why did she choose to come here? There was a slight mockery in his voice. He continued, mentioning that her actions were always incomprehensible. His gaze became softer, but there was an ambiguity in his words. The man put his arm around her. She frowned, looking at him suspiciously, trying to figure out where this was all leading. He chuckled, suggesting that they come over more often, as if there was something more between them. Yuna just looked tiredly, not knowing what to say. A hand slid over her shoulder. She took it away, said it wasn't worth going that far. It was time for the theater to end. The girl demanded an explanation. Her voice was firm. She wanted to know everything about the surveillance and his role in this performance. The man just shrugged. Another smirk. More mysterious hints, but she didn't back down. The apartment seemed to freeze, listening. He suggested remembering everything. About the surveillance, the reasons, the people, the agreement. Slowly, point by point. He promised to tell about all his women. He said that he would find out everything soon. He leaned closer. She was angry. Her eyes darkened. The answer was harsh. She didn't care. He just smiled. Shin Yahan came closer again. He put his arm around her shoulders, resting his head on hers. His voice became quieter, almost gentle. Everything that happened between them made sense, even if it seemed stupid now. He insisted. She had to know the truth. He proposed a deal. To be his girlfriend at the next party. This was necessary to play to the crowd and distract attention. The man kissed her lightly, almost playfully. He said that she should get used to it. Everything was starting to resemble the theater of the absurd. She froze. The shock of what was happening was overwhelming. Yahan continued to smile reservedly. Kissing her, he seemed to be testing the boundaries. His gaze became darker. Thoughts were spinning in his head, but the man did not say a word. Everything was getting too confusing. He touched her lips, thinking about how to use this moment to bring back the past. Yahan reminded him. She herself said that she was ready to be used. Now he was simply fulfilling his promise. Yuna recoiled, her eyes widening in surprise. The man looked back calmly as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. A smirk appeared on his face. Everything was going according to plan. He wasn't going to back down. The door creaked. Someone had already entered. Or someone had been inside all this time. 17 years ago, the streets of Hong Kong were bathed in evening light. High-rise buildings stretched upward, and people scurried between shop windows and cars. Hyunha was holding a baby in her arms. Someone held the car door for her and she sat down carefully, as if guarding her little treasure. Yahan looked with a kind smile, reminding that caring for the child is the most important thing. His voice sounded calm and confident. The girl looked away. Her eyes darkened. Thoughts were swirling anxiously in her head. She hugged Sanho tighter, as if protecting him from all the troubles of the world. Hours earlier, they had been in an unfamiliar apartment. Evening had fallen outside the windows and the man suggested they end it there. He promised to take them home. She was surprised, asking again if it was possible to leave this place. And then she reminded that Sanho was in danger, which meant that they were in trouble. Clutching the piece of paper in her hands, Yunha almost screamed that without his help, they would be left defenseless. Her voice trembled, but there was determination in it. He pointed to the bed in the room. The only one, large with a green blanket and 2 pillows. He jokingly said that it would be quite suitable for 2. The man looked at the bed with a smirk. He noted that he had not shared a bed with a woman for a long time. His tone was mocking but light. He started taking off his shirt, adding that he was used to sleeping naked. He asked her if she could handle it casually. The girl's eyes widened. Her cheeks flushed. She screamed in panic that she would leave and demanded to be taken home right now. He just laughed in response. His laughter was loud and sincere. Yahan explained that her fears were in vain. Everything was already under control. The man wrote something quickly. He promised that his team would guard them from the moment they returned home. He folded the sheet into a figure and reminded them, "No need. Don't go outside, the danger is still nearby." Yahan came closer, grabbed her hand. His face became serious. He promised that if she got scared, he would be there and save her. There was a paper cross in her palm. The thin figure trembled in her fingers. The kiss on her hand was unexpected but warm and sincere. Present. The girl was sitting in the car. She turned away shyly, saying that she understood everything. He added that it was not the end yet. With a slight smile, the man closed the car door and reminded her that they would see each other again soon. His voice was calm but firm. "There is a hotel in front of my eyes. A simple building, nothing special. The room is small, a sofa, a couple of paintings, the windows let in warm sunlight. A dream catcher sways in the wind. The air plays with the threads, creating a slight shimmer. Everything is calm, as if nothing had happened." Sanho was sleeping peacefully on the bed. A soft blanket wrapped his body and his face expressed complete calm. The sleep was deep. In his half-sleep, the boy heard a voice. Recognized it. He thought about his uncle, but inside he felt anxious. Something told him this was an important moment. He didn't want to ask questions. He was afraid to hurt. But an inner voice insisted that there was something strange and dangerous. The boy sat up in bed and rubbed his eyes. Voices could be heard through the slightly open door. Someone was discussing him. He tensed up. There were 2 people sitting at the table in the kitchen. The uncle was holding the girl's hand. His fingers were shaking. He was telling about the visit of strangers and the police. The child hid behind the door. His heart was beating faster. He knew they were talking about him. Every sound seemed louder than before. The man spoke of envelopes with blood, threats, and photographs. His voice broke. His fingers clenched tighter. He was afraid for his loved ones. The child became scared to the point of trembling. Sweat was running down his temples. He stood, leaning against the door, listening to every word with horror. The girl had suggested pretending they didn't know anything. It seemed the only way out. For a while. To protect. She explained that the person protecting the boy had already cleared their tracks. All they could do was be careful and not panic. The man continued to worry, and she said that she could no longer bear it if the small child was harmed. Yoon-ha asked him to pretend a little longer. For the boy. For the family. For the peace of mind that was hanging on by a thread. Her hands clenched into fists. Her voice trembled. She asked him to hold on until the boy decided to reveal the truth himself. The child's hand on the door handle trembled. An uneasy silence hung in the room. The creaking of the door made everyone shudder. The girl jumped up and rushed to the door. She opened it and looked in, but the child was lying under the blanket as if fast asleep. She came back. She closed the door, and behind her the boy, holding his breath, clasped his hands to his mouth. Fear paralyzed his body. Standing up, Sanho muttered to himself. He looked at the ceiling in despair. Thoughts were racing through his head. He was afraid of being exposed. His gaze fell on the hanging dream catcher. He hesitated, not knowing what to do. Everything seemed confusing and dangerous. Moments from the past came to mind. Grandma, passers-by, jokes. He cried but walked forward, clutching his backpack. A picture of a child covered in blood flashed through his mind. He asked to come back. Somewhere deep inside he hoped that it was possible. The man on his knees wiped his hands and smiled. His father's promises and words echoed in his head. A broken door. Someone's screams, a painful choice. All of this merged into a terrible tangle of memories that choked me from the inside. The boys stood nearby, eavesdropping. One of the adults said that he would not forgive her. His voice was full of pain and rage. The one they called the devil was close. There was no choice left. A decision had to be made, and quickly. Father Sanho shouted that he would finish everything himself. The little listeners stood aside, afraid to breathe. Fear grew in their hearts. The boy clutched the bed tightly. He didn't want to go back. Anger raged inside. He hated the lies and empty words of adults. No one could be trusted, even those who were close. Sanho knew. Now he himself must find a way out. There was no other way. His fingers squeezed the dream catcher. He knew that there was no help to be expected from anywhere. The only hope was in himself. He had to act. His gaze fell on a white sheet of paper. That very one. His hands were shaking. The boy unfolded the paper, read it, and then clenched it into a fist. Now there was a plan. He knew what to do. The decision had been made. All that was left was to wait for the right moment and carry it out. Uncle Yoon-hee walked into the room, wiping his forehead. Meanwhile, the girl was vacuuming the floors, and Sang-ho was sitting on the vacuum cleaner. The man came up, ruffled San-ho's hair, and cheerfully invited him to the roof. He promised him dinner if he helped with the garden. The boy agreed. The uncle and the child went out. Something flashed in the child's back pocket. The phone rang. The girl, busy with the call, did not notice. She answered, and the voice on the other end called her by name. Yoon-ha looked at the screen in surprise, not understanding where the number came from. Ihan was clutching the paper at the other end. His face was angry. He knew who was behind this. Anger was building up inside. The man was quietly whistling something to himself. Meanwhile, San-ho was following the adult. He had a knife in his pocket. The child's gaze was gloomy. He had already made a decision. The morning was clear. The sky was painted blue. Tall buildings reflected the sun's rays. The city slowly woke up, filling with movement. Someone was hurriedly climbing up the concrete steps. The quick steps echoed as if anxiety was chasing them. Haste was evident in every movement. It was Yoon-ha. Her gaze was sharp, her face tense. The girl was clutching a piece of paper in her hands, which she was squeezing with all her might. Something was bothering her. The door to the balcony swung open with force. She literally burst in, shouting San-ho's name from the threshold. The anger in her voice left no doubt. Her patience had snapped. Two people were digging in the garden bed. One adult started from a scream. The other, a boy, turned around. A knife flashed in his right hand. A radish was clutched in his left. The uncle visibly tensed up, his gaze darting between the child and the newcomer. The child only looked at him in bewilderment, not understanding where all the noise was coming from. Manhwa came closer, suddenly holding out her hand with the document. The paper trembled in the air as if reflecting her inner state. The sheet clearly showed a transfer agreement approved by the guardian. It stated that the transfer was only possible with her consent. The relative froze. It was unclear whether he understood what was being said. But the boy, without looking away, confirmed with a light exhalation. This was their agreement. The girl's eyes turned red. Her fingers tightened their grip on the sheet of paper, shaking it in the air. The pressure almost tore the paper. Sanho calmly reminded her that she had signed the document. It was real and it was too late to deny it now. Hyun-ha looked down. And sure enough, her name was clearly visible on the sheet. It was becoming a reality that she couldn't deny. Shock ran through her entire body. Her lips trembled, her pupils dilated. The reaction was so strong that she almost lost consciousness. Her fingers loosened. The leaves fell out and were caught by the wind. As she fell, she whispered that she must have gone mad. The ground began to float beneath her feet. Meanwhile, somewhere in the city, a completely different atmosphere reigned. On the terrace, a morning meeting was taking place. Cocktails and snacks were adorning the table. Johan sat half-naked in a relaxed pose. He held a document in his hand and spoke on the phone. Confidence shone through in every gesture. In the next room, two men were sprawled on the bed. A girl was stretching on the sheets. Someone had had a particularly wild night. She put on her robe and slowly walked towards the sofa. Johan continued talking, not paying much attention to her. The servant silently cleaned up the aftermath of the fun. The men were carried out by the arms, leaving behind silence and the smell of alcohol. Johan ended the conversation, covering his face with his hand. At this time, the girl climbed over the back of the sofa and noticed that the evening was not so fun. He just grinned. A light, almost mocking look. The man always knew how to keep his face even in the most unpleasant situations. She sat down opposite, took a cup and took a sip of tea. The comment seemed strange to her, but the girl did not intend to spoil the mood. Ihan suggested that she tidy herself up. The smile never left her face, even when his words sounded caustic. It was Hale, the heir of Jonggam. There was something bold in her gaze. Her hair was styled in perfect curls. Every gesture was perfect. She glanced at the newspaper. Her fingers were turning the pages. Next to her was a cup from which a light steam rose. Johan threw his head back and made a sarcastic remark about her appearance. Hale, without losing her composure, reminded her that they had studied in the same place. He crossed his arms and grinned. This kind of talk was common for them, an argument as part of the morning ritual. The only thing that disturbed the peace was their voices. Everything else seemed too familiar. None of them thought about how it sounded from the outside. Hale placed the cup on the table. The liquid spilled over the edge. Her gaze became icy, her patience was running out. Johan responded as if he hadn't noticed her irritation. He suggested that they look into the heart of the matter if she really cared. She grabbed the newspaper again. Her voice was shaking with anger. Both the atmosphere and the calm of her interlocutor were irritating. All this was driving her crazy. The explosion of emotions was close. The girl accused him of disrespect, of indifference, reminded him of the family ties that he had long ignored. The man just smiled. Everything that was said seemed to pass by. He didn't listen, he just waited for the storm to pass. A brightly manicured hand rested on his temple. She paused, then demanded specifics. Did he have a plan? Johan nodded calmly. There had been changes, but nothing critical. Everything was under control, even if it looked different. He explained that minor pranks were annoying, but not enough to change the direction of the entire plan. The man remained cool, asked her to get back to her business. It sounded almost like an order. Not rude, but clear enough. I asked the girl if she had managed to find a solution. She confirmed it with satisfaction. Everything was ready. The evidence had been collected. Hale took a box out of her pocket and placed it on the table. Inside was a piece of jewelry, unusual with details as if it had been made to order. Johan looked at the find with interest. The girl's resourcefulness impressed him. Everything was going according to plan. She spoke softer. She didn't want it to end in bloodshed. Even if it was about other people's children, her heart wouldn't let her rest. Johan took the box. He looked at it with curiosity. Her words sounded sincere, even if they were hidden behind mockery. She remembered Elena's children. She didn't want everything to happen again. She would have preferred to protect at least someone. She joked that she would have to teach Noel military training, although she had never held a weapon in her hands, but she had no choice. Johann chuckled, putting his cup down. There was something strange in her voice, a combination of worry and hope. He felt it. If everything had turned out differently, perhaps life would be different now. Everyone could be happy, including herself. The man looked at Hale differently. Something changed in his gaze. His answer was quieter than usual. The girl caught this look. A slight smile touched her lips. It was unusual for him to be shy. She suddenly remembered about the documents. Her eyes lit up. She started talking about the woman who was protecting the child. Johann asked what exactly she wanted. The answer was simple: to meet, at least once before the trip. She reached for the box. Inside was a decoration. It was especially beautiful. The girl had a request. She wanted to deliver it personally. There was something important, personal, inexplicable about it. And at this time many years ago, morning was breaking in another house. Light was streaming into the room, drawing patterns on the floor. The boy sat on the bed, his face buried in his knees. In front of him lay a piece of paper, the same contract he had thrust into the girl's hand. Yun-ha stood over him. The child was shaking with guilt. It seemed like there was a lump in his throat and his eyes couldn't look up. He knew he had done wrong. Yun-ha looked at him sternly and screamed. She reminded him that he himself had asked for a signature while she was sleeping. There was indignation in her voice. The boy looked down. Everything inside him was clenching. He wanted to disappear, just not to see her hurt. The girl picked up the paper again and waved it in front of him. She demanded an answer, but the boy remained silent, frowning and blushing. He pressed his lips tightly together and said that he had brought this trouble upon himself. But in response, he heard that Yun-ha had no intention of taking care of him. The girl was confused. She didn't understand why he was saying that. And San-ho looked straight ahead and quietly whispered that he understood everything. He added that adults lie, all of them. Even though the child wanted to believe she betrayed him like the others. San-ho wiped away his tears with his fist. His heart ached and his voice trembled. He didn't believe her anymore, even though he tried so hard. Hun-ha crawled closer and tried to console him. But the child screamed that he didn't believe her and turned away. She reached out to him, trying to wipe away her tears. She said that she didn't understand anything, asked him to listen. San-ho continued to cry. He screamed that he heard everything yesterday, that the girl betrayed him. Yun-ha frowned. She tried to understand what happened. It hurt her to hear Sang-ho's words. She quietly asked him what was wrong. And he, sobbing, tried to say something but could not find the words. Suddenly the telephone on the table rang. It distracted everyone with its loud sound. Yun-ha didn't understand what he wanted to say, but she asked him to wait and reached for her phone. She answered briefly and confusedly. A woman introduced herself on the other end of the line. She called herself Sin Hale. The girl looked away in surprise. She didn't recognize the name. It was unexpected. The voice on the other end of the line continued. Shin Hale suggested meeting. Yun-ha froze, not knowing what to say. The morning sun flooded the streets, creating an illusion of calm. The hotel was silent, broken only by the occasional sound. Yun-ha leaned on the table and listened tensely to the phone ringing, her face expressing confusion and anxiety. She asked the other person's name again, not understanding who they were talking about. The voice on the other end of the line sounded confident and insistent. On the other end of the line, Shin Hale smiled slyly, enjoying the girl's confusion. Her tone was filled with a hidden challenge. Yun-ha felt confused, not knowing who this woman was. Shock paralyzed her thoughts, preventing her from finding answers. Sin Hale, noticing her interlocutor's confusion, raised her eyebrows in surprise. Her hands froze in the air, reflecting slight bewilderment. The girl approached Sang-ho, trying to find out if he had heard about Shin Hale. There was no response, which only increased her anxiety. She assumed that perhaps the woman had dialed the wrong number, and glanced at the boy sitting on the bed, seeking support from him. Hun-ha apologized, saying that she was busy and suggested rescheduling the conversation if it wasn't urgent. Her voice sounded tense. The boy lowered his head. His eyes were frightened, his hands were shaking. He clearly felt out of place. The girl, without waiting for an answer, said that she would call back later and turned off the phone. Her thoughts were in confusion. Shin Hale wasn't used to being rejected. Her hands shook with anger as she clutched her phone, realizing that she had been ignored. The woman turned to the secretary with irritation and pointed to the phone screen. She had just been hung up on and it had clearly offended her. The man calmly confirmed her words, nodding and calling her boss. His voice was even, without unnecessary emotion, as always. Shin Hale clutched her hair in her fist, her face twisted in rage. She promised that the girl would regret her actions. With disdain in her voice, she noted that Yoon-ha was frivolous. Her expectations were not met, which made her even more angry. The secretary confirmed her words. They headed to the hotel where the girl and the child were. Hun-ha sat down next to Sang-ho on the bed. The boy looked depressed, his face expressing sadness and worry. The girl tilted her head, trying to understand what had happened. Her eyes searched for answers in the boy's expression. She repeated the name Shin Hale in her mind, trying to remember where she knew it from. Her fingers nervously twisted the object in her hands. Looking at Sang-ho's reaction, the girl realized that Shin Hale was related to his family. The boy withdrew into himself, avoiding her gaze. She remembered Johan the woman had mentioned. He was the same man who called himself Judas and made appointments with her. While thinking, Yoon-ha realized that their company was collecting huge amounts of money, but she had never heard of it before. The company's products were expensive, specializing in weapons production. They guarded their secrets carefully. Despite its huge profits, the organization was not widely known in Korea and avoided any major incidents. The girl knew a little about it. Grandma San-ho came to the company as a second-generation daughter-in-law and significantly increased its income. The rumors about the company were contradictory. Yoon-ha frowned, trying to make sense of the information. She recalled learning about it at the opening celebration, when many gathered in support. But who exactly was this woman? Had she seen her before? Questions swarmed in her head, finding no answers. The boy raised his head and looked at the phone, his eyes expressing concern and anticipation. San-ho asked with a demanding tone who she was talking to, his voice trembling with emotion. The girl, surprised by his tone, asked again, trying to understand the reason for his concern. San-ho raised his voice in anger, demanding an answer. His face was red, his eyes were sparkling with resentment. He began to nervously bite his finger, then stopped abruptly, declaring that he had already understood everything. Yoon-ha gently took his hand, moving it away from his mouth, trying to calm him down. She asked if he was in pain, offering him a pill, her voice full of concern. The boy bit his lip and irritably replied that she shouldn't say anything stupid, because everything was already clear. He accused her of pretending not to understand anything, and this angered him. In a fit of emotion, the child hit her hand, leaving a red mark. Yoon-ha pulled her hand back, shocked by his reaction. The boy said that when he became useless, she would leave him. His words were full of pain and despair. He invited her to use him as she needed, emphasizing his willingness to be an instrument. The girl looked at him with incomprehension, looked away, and quietly said that he was a child in need of protection. The boy clutched the fabric of his t-shirt, his hands shaking with tension. San-ho tried to explain what he wanted her to know, but his words were jumbled and his emotions were overwhelming. Yoon-ha assured the child that, despite the circumstances, her goal was to protect him and prove his innocence. The boy raised his head, his eyes filled with tears. He admitted that he did not quite understand the girl. She explained that no matter how she felt, San-ho was still a child who needed to be protected. The boy, confused, objected that he was not as small as Yoon-ha thought and had lived without protection for a long time. He emphasized that he always managed on his own, without relying on anyone. There was stubbornness and pain in his voice. Yoon-ha looked down sadly and said softly that she would then become the adult who would not deceive him or betray him. The boy looked at her with disbelief, but a spark of hope flashed in his eyes. Then he began to cry, unable to hold back. She reached out and gently stroked his cheek, promising that if he needed protection, she would not back down. Sang-ho turned away, whispering that he didn't have to continue. He was having a hard time controlling his emotions. Yoon-ha calmly said that she would wait until he decided to tell her everything himself. She was ready to be there until the end. She took his face in her hands and smiled. He looked at her through tears, wondering why she was so kind to him. San-ho wasn't used to being cared for. It seemed strange to him that someone could just be there. A whisper escaped his lips. The girl just smiled in response, adding that it was not easy to explain. It would take time to understand everything. The boy listened intently, sensing that what he was hearing might hurt, but he was ready to talk. Hyun-ha sighed and admitted that she hadn't told anyone about it yet. She felt awkward, but she decided to do it. She started by saying that it all happened in middle school, when Hyun-ha lost her parents and younger brother in an accident. There was her house, a cozy two-story one. My heart sank from the memories. Everything seemed so far away. The girl remembered how painful it is to lose those who remain in your memory forever. Hyun-ha heard her little brother's voice calling her. He was so small, kind, and happy. The boy happily reached for the door, calling his sister. He wanted to go to the game with his parents. The child did not know then that this was their last day together. The girl stood in a school uniform with a backpack, turning around when called. She smiled at her brother, not even suspecting that she would lose him. He asked if he could go to the match with his mom and dad. His eyes were shining with happiness. Hyun-ha remembered it well. Later she learned about the tragedy. It was too late. And since then this feeling of guilt has not left her. When her loved ones left, she was still a teenager. The 16-year-old girl did not understand how to live on with this pain inside. The little brother grabbed hold of my sleeve, begging to be taken along. He promised to be quiet. He looked down at me like a puppy asking for forgiveness. Hyun-ha tried to refuse, but she couldn't. Sighing, she allowed him to go if only he would be quieter. She stroked his head and hugged him tighter. As they were going down, he walked next to her, clinging to her side. Her parents were shouting from below. The car was already waiting. The girl looked back, squeezing her brother's hand. The sports complex building shone with grandeur. Competitions were held there. Hyun-ha, with a gold medal and a certificate, tired but pleased with herself, posed for the cameras. Later in the hallway, a boy ran up to her with a bouquet of flowers. She hugged her brother and whispered how tired she was and how she dreamed of going home. Her parents offered to go without her, promising to prepare a party. Hyun-ha nodded and stayed to talk to the coach. Suddenly, he burst into the locker room, completely panicked. His face turned pale. He said there had been an accident, a serious one. Things were packed in a hurry. Together with the coach, she rushed to the hospital. Her heart was squeezed with fear and uncertainty. It all happened because of a drunk driver. The relatives died immediately. The girl could not believe that she had seen them just recently. Scenes popped into my head. Smiles, flowers, congratulations. But now they seemed alien. It was all gone too quickly. There was no crying. There were no loud tears like in the movies. Only emptiness and a lump in her throat. She sat as if nothing had happened, on a bench in funeral clothes with a soda in hand. Dry eyes and silence inside. Thoughts about how everything fell apart. A scream from behind brought her out of her trance. The uncle ran up, hurrying. The girl stood up from the bench and turned to the child, who was sitting quietly next to her, his eyes downcast. She leaned over to the baby, ran her hand through his hair and quietly said goodbye. In parting, she added that maybe they would see each other again. There were 3 photographs hanging in the hall. The relatives looked at them happily. The girl looked back, unable to believe in the loss. The house greeted her with silence. Arriving, Hyun-ha thanked her uncle. He offered to stay with him, but the girl refused. She had to go back. The door creaked. Hyun-ha whispered a phrase that no one could hear. The rooms were empty, like the heart. Scenes of life floated up in my memory. Someone was playing, someone was laughing, someone was calling. And now all this was gone. Tears welled up in her eyes. She leaned against the wall, feeling her chest tighten. The air was getting smaller and smaller. The hand clutched the fabric of the t-shirt as if grasping at something alive. The body trembled. Sobs burst forth. That night she stayed on the floor with the photographs. Her thoughts were racing. In her head was an ocean, endless and dark. Inside she felt like a boat sailing to nowhere. Without a goal, without a direction. Only sadness was a compass. In order not to drown in this darkness, she came up with a goal. She decided not to lose anyone else, and to protect those who remained. She lay on the bed next to Sanho and thought, this is not for him but for herself, so as not to regret, so as not to be afraid. She considered herself boring, but she was looking for him. She admitted it to herself. And that day everything changed. Something inside became clear. He listened silently. He closed himself off but did not look away. Big blue eyes looked with attention and sympathy. Hyun-ha continued, I don't want to lose, I don't want to run away. I want this moment to become an important part of my journey. The boy didn't know what to say. He just looked. The girl smiled, sincerely, for the first time in a long time. If Sanho doesn't understand, it's okay. The main thing is to be there. When she gets scared, she wants to run away, but not this time. She rubbed her legs together nervously, scratched the back of her head, and admitted that she was not the perfect adult. The boy looked up and said that he wanted to be like her. Yoonha's gaze briefly flashed with a touch of shock and tenderness. He hesitantly reached for it and remembered the paper boat. He wanted to know if it was strong. Hearing that it was still holding up, he calmed down a little. Then another question popped into his head. Could she ever break? The girl thought for a moment, repeating these words in silence and looking away. Sang-ho spoke again, wondering how it felt to be floating on the sea. Yoonha thought about herself and admitted that she seemed to have already drowned in this vast emptiness. The boy continued. If even a paper boat could sail forward, maybe he could be part of its journey, if only for a brief moment. He wanted to say something else, but he didn't have time. The doorbell rang. The girl shuddered and turned around. Her frightened gaze darted to the boy. She was shaking as if she felt threatened. Someone was outside the door. Sang-ho was confused. His eyes darkened. Anxiety gripped him too. He realized that someone dangerous had come. Sin-hail appeared on the intercom screen. The secretary stood behind her. She rang the bell demanding that the door be opened. Meanwhile, in another city there is a huge airport. Light bustle. A woman with security comes out of the building. The gray-haired lady in white walked confidently. The boy kept up with her, trying not to fall behind. He looked tiredly at his feet. The woman said the phrase coldly. The child shuddered. He corrected himself. He called her not grandmother, but mother. He was wearing black shorts, a t-shirt with a yellow bow tie and blue sneakers. It was little Noel. On the table were 2 glasses of cold iced drink and oatmeal cookies with nuts and candied fruits. Yoonha was all tense and trembling subconsciously, her hands tightly clutching the glass. Opposite her sat the uninvited guest, sipping her drink. Our heroine, staring angrily at the brunette, asked herself who she was, and automatically took big sips from the glass. Recently, someone brazenly burst into the door, and if they were people from the same family, then their upbringing left much to be desired. That's what Yoonha thought. The guest brazenly declared that she had not come here to drink tea, and suggested that they get straight to business. She said that the purpose of her visit was to sign a contract with Yoonha. They needed a reliable person who could be trusted with one thing.